It is Tuesday, March 2nd, our regular council meeting, calling to order here. City Clerk, roll call.
Mayor Deasy.
Here.
Vice Mayor Daggett.
Here.
Councilmember Aslan.
Here.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Here.
Councilmember Salas.
Present.
Councilmember Shimoni.
Here.
Councilmember Sweet.
Present.
Excellent. Councilmember Salas, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Please stand as you are able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember. And the mission of the City of Flagstaff is to protect and enhance the quality of life for all. City Clerk, do we have anyone for general public participation?
Yes, Mayor, I believe we do. Let me see if they're on the line. Just a moment.
Okay.
Participation. All right, hold on just a moment.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Stacy.
Mr. John Victoria, you are ready to go ahead.
Okay, am I all set?
You are. Please go ahead.
Okay, first things first. Adam, Regina, Becky, Austin, Greg, Shane, Sterling, and others. Thank you each for being a personification of common decency, community respect, and Flagstaff tradition. Paul Deasy, as before, you make me sick to my stomach. Your apology to Ross Altenberg was not an apology at all, because you apologized to the microphone, to the Malpai walls, to the lights and the chairs. Your ugly offense and profound indignity, Deasy, was directed at Ross and not those objects. You are truly bankrupt when it comes to possession of the moral strength required to apologize authentically. In my disappointment and frustration in dealing with your reckless disregard for common standards, I have wanted to characterize you as a Neanderthal. I cannot do that, because if I did, I would be dishonoring the Neanderthal. I will not dishonor the Neanderthal by comparing you to them. I believe the reporting of the Flagstaff Police Department and not you. I'm very sorry to say, Deasy, you are a liar. Lacking any clear sign of community moral development, you need to be put on probation and let Becky be the mayor. In conclusion, a special thank you to Regina and Adam for sharing your well-developed and respectful communication skills with me. You are too kind. You two are just pretty wonderful. Well, wonderful council members and fantastic human beings. So for tonight, I am done. Thank you. And goodbye.
All right, down to agenda item number 5A, whereas our proclamations and recognitions. To start with is COVID-19 Memorial Day. Whereas the first Monday in March has been designated as COVID-19 Victims and Survivors Memorial Day. And whereas COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, is an illness caused by a virus that can transmit from person to person and is spread across the world, creating a global pandemic that is having catastrophic effects on human life, our community, and our economy. And whereas local and state governments, health departments, and public servants have been bold actions to protect residents, support struggling local economies, and find innovative ways to provide services. And whereas in response to rapid spread of COVID-19 and stay-at-home orders, essential workers have stepped up to provide critical services to help protect our communities and save lives, sacrificing their own health and safety. And whereas COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on low-income communities and communities of color, exacerbating inequities already prevalent in our systems that we must address as a nation. Whereas public health guidance and policies targeted at prevention, such as social distancing, wearing masks in public, and staying home, help mitigate the spread of COVID-19, prevent illness, and lessen the burden on individuals and society. Whereas the symptoms and severity of COVID-19 can vary dramatically by individual, and the long-term health implications for survivors is largely unknown, as many survivors suffer from lingering side effects of the disease long after they no longer test positive. And whereas more than number at a time of adoption people worldwide and number at a time of adoption in the United States have lost their lives due to COVID-19. And in city alone, more than number of time of adoption lives have been lost to the deadly virus. And whereas each life lost to COVID-19 mattered and leaves a hole in the hearts of loved ones, family members, and surrounding community. Therefore, I, Paul Deasy, Mayor of the City of Flagstaff, do hereby proclaim the first Monday in March as COVID-19 Memorial Day, in remembrance of those who have lost their lives and in honor of those who are forever marked by COVID and continue to suffer from the impacts of the virus. Agenda item 5B is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas colorectal cancer is the third most common cancer diagnosed in the United States among both men and women. And whereas the American Cancer Society estimates that there will be 140,270 new cases of colon cancer and 45,230 new rectal cancer cases within the United States for 2021. And whereas less than half, 48.4%, of American Indian Alaskan Natives, adults aged 50 to 75, were up to date with colorectal cancer screening in 2015. And whereas the National Cancer Institute has developed a 7-year cancer moonshot initiative to address the concerns of cancer through a 21st Century Cures Act passed by Congress in December 2016. And whereas with this initiative, Native Americans for Community Action, Northern Arizona University's Partnership for Native American Cancer Prevention, and University of Arizona's Cancer Center have come together to develop a statewide campaign to increase colorectal cancer education and screening in order to nurture healthy lifestyle behaviors among the AIAN population. And whereas the importance of early detection and cancer prevention strategies such as improved diet, increased physical activity, and the use of established screening tests could alleviate additional cancer morbidity and mortality for all. Now, therefore, I, Paul Deasy, Mayor of the City of Flagstaff, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2021 to be Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month and commend its observance to all citizens. Agenda item 5C is our National Social Worker Month. Whereas the social work profession for decades has been dedicated to improving human well-being and enhancing the basic needs of all people, especially the most vulnerable among us. And whereas this year's Social Work Month theme, Social Workers Are Essential, embodies the heroic contributions of the social work profession to our nation, including the work social workers have done to heal our nation during these times of pandemic, racial unrest, economic uncertainty, and political divisiveness. And whereas social workers have always been present in time of crisis, helping people overcome issues such as death and grief, and helping people and communities recover from natural disasters such as fires, hurricanes, and earthquakes. And whereas social workers have helped this nation live up to its values by successfully advocating for equal rights for all people, no matter their race, sexual identity, gender expression, culture, or religion. And whereas the social work profession is one of the fastest growing professions in the United States, with nearly 800,000 people expected to be employed as social workers by 2028. Whereas social workers work in all parts of our society to empower people to live to their fullest potential. And whereas school social workers have worked with families and school throughout the pandemic to ensure students reach their full academic and personal potential. And whereas social workers play a crucial role in our nation's healthcare system and have played a key role in the nation's response to COVID-19 and helping individuals, families, and communities cope with the epidemic. Whereas social workers for generations have advocated for positive changes that have made our society a better place to live, including urging policymakers to adopt the minimum wage, improve workplace safety, and enact social safety net programs that help ameliorate hunger, homelessness, and poverty. And whereas social workers are one of the largest groups of mental health care providers in the United States and work daily to help people, whether in person or remotely, overcome substance use disorders and mental illness such as depression and anxiety. And whereas social workers will continue to stand ready to assist our nation in overcoming present and future challenges, including pushing for racial equity, ending gun violence, improving healthcare and mental health care for all, and makers to adopt immigration reforms. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Paul J. Deasy, in recognition of the numerous contributions made by America's social workers, proclaim the month of March 2021 as National Social Work Month, and call upon all citizens to join the National Association of Social Workers in celebration and support of the social work profession. All right, Council, we are down to agenda item number 6. This is our consent items. We have 4 of them here. I would like to pull out specifically the consent item 6C. We're regarding the Mountain High Excavating LLC for the West Flag improvements, the David and Hutchison project in the amount of $2,573,961.01. Council members, is anyone interested in pulling out consent items A or B? So I can stay in order. All right, well, I had a question regarding this capital improvement project. I know we've discussed a lot about the broadband and getting our conduit down on more of the main arteries of our city, but I was interested in, given that it is basically the entryway to the neighborhood. From my understanding of the neighborhood, it is all copper wire right now. There's no fiber. If there may be an opportunity to potentially put down conduit that down the road we might be able to lease. Do we have Director Perry on the line? And or anyone from, contracting with regards to this?
Thank you, Mayor Deasy. Paul Santana here for IT. At this point in time, and I may defer actually to Rick Barrett, our city engineer, or even Shane Dilley, our deputy city manager, as they've also commented on this particular piece. Our council direction up to this point has essentially been to focus on the main arterial routes and less on that last mile for residential service. At this point in time, there was not any interest in adding or potentially adding any conduit to this residential project for that reason specifically. But again, actually, our city engineer, Rick Barrett, is available to speak on this as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Santana. Mr. Barrett?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of council. I'm City Engineer Rick Barrett. Yes, I've seen the email, and I share your concern, and we are here to put conduit in the ground. It is an easy thing for us to accomplish as part of a capital project, but I think what is important here is that our transportation group, in conjunction with CJ Perry, our IT director, have designed a backbone system, through a planning effort. And you have our commitment that we are going to put that conduit in the ground if it matches that planning effort. We just don't see the need to get this conduit in the ground in a residential or this neighborhood that is part of these 2 capital projects. But if that is council's direction to put conduit in the ground for future need, we'd be glad to consider that request, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Ed. And yes, I know we definitely had the direction discussion with the main arteries in town for the plan. It's just when I'm looking at these projects, and it is right a block away from the entrance of the neighborhood, that maybe if the council would be interested and would like to chime in or Deputy City Manager Dilly has a comment.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Engineer Barrett, and also Paul in IT. I sure appreciate those comments. And Mayor, thank you for the question. Of course, staff is here at the at your discretion in terms of where you want to go with this as a council. On the side of staff, our sensitivity is limited funds and making the most bang for what we have. So getting the biggest return on investment. And as we saw CJ last week, overlay potential partnerships with connecting our community together. I think there's a plan laid out for us, and we've strategically are going to be placing our available resources to furthering that that plan. So we have so that we have the backbone of this broadband that leads through our community and connects things, and providing, because of that, an opportunity for some of the more local ISPs to jump on board and further that effort into the homes itself. But to make sure that we have the resources necessary to make that backbone happen is kind of where staff's focus is today. So I think I wanted to put that on the table, and just the concern is that if we start splintering off our scarce resources to these neighborhood projects, we may not have what we need to complete the original plan, and that was to get that backbone in place for the community to take advantage of. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. How much, Mr. Barrett, does it typically cost to, when the hole's already dug, to be able to lay the conduit in there? I mean, looking at the, $2.57 million contract we're discussing, I mean, just so I can get a sense when we're talking these things, what would be the extra cost associated potentially with this? Or is that difficult to nail down?
I don't know that it's difficult to nail down, but I will also admit that I don't have accurate numbers and probably should avoid answering that question. I apologize. But I will go as far as to say that the cost to put conduit in a trench that's already dug for a water line it is inexpensive. I mean, there's no doubt that the cost of the conduit alone, glued together, there's some labor to put it together, that's not expensive. Where I believe the expense comes in is if the community doesn't use it. And I think that speaks to what Deputy Manager Dilly spoke to. To me, the importance of the planning efforts guide us in developing these projects, not just so that we know what to build and that, we are checking all the boxes, but again, it has to do with efficiency of government. It has to do with were we wasteful or not. I can tell you that I've been asked to install conduit in a trench that was there anyhow for a 40-year career. And I'm actually, again, I'm shooting from the hip and I'm guessing here, but the amount of times that we've actually used said conduit, I think pale in comparison to the times that conduit has sat there unused. So that's what I have to offer, and I'm here to help answer any other questions. And we could dig in deeper as to what the exact cost of that conduit would be, but again, it's going to be fairly insignificant as compared to the cost of the overall waterline project.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Well, if I might be able to get solicited some commentary from other council members, if this is something you might be interested in or whatnot, then that would be, that'd be great.
Oh, yeah. No, for his picture, you're right.
Well, give me a chance to drink water because I've been talking a lot this meeting already. Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. What I'm thinking is that maybe we can look into this for future projects. I hate to slow down this project, which is, shovel ready, basically. And then the other question, it's probably more complicated than just putting the conduit down. I mean, if homes along the street want to tie into it, how do they tie into it? Do we need boxes, or do they just dig a hole and can they just splice into it? And I don't really know if it's that straightforward or if it's more complicated if we really want to use it. So maybe we could look into that for future projects and maybe let this one go through as is. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Councilmember. For if we did look into doing the conduit for this particular project, is this going to slow down the contract and breaking ground and getting this done, Mr. Barrett?
It would certainly add scope of work to the contract. I think there's also a concern, certainly one from myself, that we are talking about changing a contract that is to be awarded before said contract is awarded. That's a red flag for me. It might be for Sterling. So I mean, I'm kind of where Jim McCarthy is, Councilmember McCarthy is, in regard to let's focus on future projects. But in terms of adding scope like this to a waterline project where the trench is already dug, this is not a major scope change in any way, no.
Okay, thank you. Deputy City Manager, were you wanting to comment on? Oh, where am I on the lineup?
So Mayor, thank you. I did delete it, but in response directly to Councilmember McCarthy, what we're talking about here is just laying the conduit. The fiber isn't being pulled through it. That would be much further down the road when we actually had the fiber in the conduit, whether that's being provided by the city or a local ISP. And then there would be protocol on how to tap that and bring it to the actual home. But all of that is the future step. This is just the conduit. Thank you.
Yeah, this would just be for the tubes themselves, and then down the road we could potentially lease those to an ISP when they want to put down the fiber. Vice Mayor Daggett.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that I would agree with the sentiment that I'm hearing to perhaps hold off and plan this for future projects so that we don't slow this project down. And I think all of the questions being raised are very good questions and ones that I would want answers to before deciding how we wanted to proceed with this, including legal, some of the legal questions, and also just looking at where there's already connection in town and where we're missing it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor, and hi, everybody. Mayor, when I saw this agenda item, I thought the same thing. And then I looked at the map and I thought, do we need it here? Is this where it makes sense to place it? And so my question for IT is, do we want this type of conduit and fiber on every street in this community, or is it more of a strategic, loop that CJ had talked to us about? I just don't know. I think that we need a better plan in place before we start integrating it in. So I agree with the colleagues that have spoken so far, but I appreciate where your mind's at, Mayor, and I'm right there with you. And I thought this could be a good opportunity for that as well. I just don't know if it makes sense. Can someone from IT, was it Paul who spoke earlier?
Yeah, Mr. Santana.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. Yeah, I mean, essentially to echo Shane and Rick's comments, if we do begin focusing more on the residential end, it is in a way moving away from our original intent with the main arterial lines. Our specific intent is to not be or become an internet service provider, but essentially have the potential for conduit leasing opportunities in key areas. It would take quite a bit more work to determine what existing service feeds every neighborhood. in the city or every residential project that may come up. That is something that could be done. It's just not something, it's not information that we possess at this point to be able to say this neighborhood would need this and this one would not. It would be quite a bit more extensive work to be able to determine that information from a service provider standpoint to see what's existing, because a lot of that infrastructure does not belong to the city.
Antenna and Mayor, kind of went to, I think that a strategic plan, and I'm happy to help see us work through that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Sorry, Mr. Bear, were you going to chime in? Okay.
No, Mayor, I'm sorry.
No problem. I thought I saw you.
But I'm here if there's any more questions.
All right, sounds good. Well, with that, I will, we can drop the idea for this specific project, but, I think it'd be a good thing for us to maybe even start thinking about, I know we already had the direction for getting the main arteries in town taken care of, but maybe moving forward, we can kind of back up this conversation with council and maybe think about our, doing more strategic planning rather than this one-off case. But I do think that if we're digging a hole into a specific neighborhood, that maybe we need to think when it's pennies on the dollar if that's feasible, or a little bit, I guess, not right on the council meeting where we're deciding on this contract. So I look forward to those future conversations. Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Considering kind of where we're at on that, I move that we approve the consent items, which is items 6A, B, C, and D.
Councilmember Sweet.
And I second that motion.
All right, we have a motion from Councilmember McCarthy. And a second by Councilmember Sweet. I do see Councilmember Shimoni does have a comment on the consent item.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is just really quick on 6B. I just wanted to give a shout out to our Deputy Fire Chief, Mark Wilson, and the fire team for this partnership. Is massive, $680,000 with a match from the city of $46,000 approximately. I'm rounding down with these numbers, but it's a great opportunity for our fire department and for the city, and it's a great use of a partnership. So cheers and thank you.
City Attorney Solomon has a comment.
Yes, Mayor, I just wanted to make sure we called for the vote. I know Councilmember McCarthy and Councilmember Sweet, Councilmember McCarthy made the motion, Councilmember Sweet seconded it, but I didn't hear the vote.
Yeah, we hadn't got there. I wanted to still keep it open for discussion since Councilmember Shimoni. But thank you. Yes, we did. We have those two motions, and if there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? That motion carries. We are now down to agenda item number 7. This is our routine items. 7A is the consideration.
Actually, Mayor, we will need a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda items as posted. There was only one pulled out, as I recall.
No, it was all 4 of them.
Mr. Sterling, this is Jim McCarthy. My motion was very specific to approve 6A, B, C, and D.
Sorry, my apologies.
That's the first mistake you've ever made.
Thank you, council members, and thank you, City Attorney, for keeping this in line.
It'll happen again. I'll make another mistake.
All right. Well then, yes, our agenda item 7A is the consideration and approval of preliminary plat. This is a request from TLC PC Golf LLC for preliminary plat approval for Club Cabin Condominiums 2 at the Estates at Pine Canyon Unit 1, a 3-unit residential condominium subdivision on 10.88 acres at 3000 South Clubhouse Circle. Staff recommended action is staff recommends, based on the required findings and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation of approval on February 10th, 2021, with a 6-0 vote, that the City Council approves the preliminary plat.
Thank you, Mayor Deasy. This is Genevieve Pair 3, current planning, planning development manager in the current planning section. I'm here to present this preliminary plat request. I will have my video on now, but I'm going to turn it off once I present. So let me go ahead and share my screen and I will get started. All right, can you see my screen? I can't tell if it's sharing.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so this is the, let's see, this is the Club Cabins unit, Club Cabin Condominiums 2 at the Estate at Pine Canyon Unit 1 subdivision. This is a preliminary plat approval request. And I will discuss the next one. Sorry, I'm having it on my screen. It's not showing up as full screen, so apologies for that. Anyway, I'll just do my best. So anyway, this is a request from TLC PC Golf LLC, and this is for preliminary plat approval. It's for a 3-unit residential condominium subdivision located at 3000 South Clubhouse Circle. So it's located on Tract K, which is approximately 11 acres. And that is in the Estates at Pine Canyon Unit 1 subdivision. So that's the area of Pine Canyon that includes the parking lot, the clubhouse, the camp, so a lot of the Pine Canyon amenities. It's located in the R1 or single family residential zone. And the purpose of this condominium plat is to create individual units. So basically the goal is to separate the ownership of the homes themselves from the land below it. So it's the ownership. This plat would basically create ownership of the airspace within each unit, plus the limited common elements associated with each unit. So that's like the decks and the porches. So this is located in, again, in Pine Canyon, so at the intersection of Lone Tree and J.W. Powell. And just a little bit of history about Pine Canyon. Again, it's a 660-acre development. It's located at, J.W. Powell and Lone Tree. It has that 31,000 square foot clubhouse, so that's on Tract K, which I mentioned previously. It also has an 18-hole golf course. There's about 500 single-family lots, about 50 townhome lots, and about 60 condominiums. And the rezoning request for Pine Canyon was approved in 2000. So this is focused on club cabins. So on Tract K, in 2016, a site plan was actually approved for 4 club cabins. So that's phase 1. And those are either built or under construction. And council approved the final plat for the club cabins 1 in 2019. But the folks of
your
this
slides aren't moving.
Oh, they're not? Oopsies. All right, let me try again. I'm on a different computer. So thank you, Tiffany.
Sorry, city manager, did you need to?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I was just going to also interject it, allow Genevieve to get this back on track. Thank you, Genevieve. And feel free to pick it up where you left off.
Sure.
Yeah, much appreciated.
No problem. The little red outline isn't showing up on my screen that I'm sharing. So let's see here. Okay, can you see that now? A presentation?
Yes, we can.
All right. Okay. Are you seeing the next slide?
Yep.
Or no?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
We're good. Yep.
Okay, great. I can't tell what you're seeing versus, I don't know why I've presented on this computer before, but this hasn't happened. But anyway, we'll figure it out. So thank you for letting me know though. So back on track. So I mentioned that this is on Tract K. So the area in green is Tract K, and I mentioned previously that Club Cabins 1 is already on Tract K, so that's the area in the blue circle. But the focus of this request is Club Cabins 2, and that's 3 cabins. So that's what this preliminary plat is for. So anyway, I mentioned previously that the purpose of this preliminary plat is to separate the ownership of the cabins from the land below. So again, it creates ownership of the airspace, which is bounded horizontally by the walls of each cabin and includes the decks and porches and things like that, then goes 40 feet up. So that's what we're talking about for this preliminary plat. So there are 3 required findings for approval for preliminary plat. So the first one is compliance with the zoning code, so that's City Code Title 10. And the cabins are permitted use on Tract K. They meet the minimum setbacks for the R1 zone. They also meet landscaping requirements, which is 29 trees, and that's provided through new and existing trees. They also meet parking requirements. 7 spaces are required, but there's 172 that are provided on the site, and there's about only required about 130 something. So they have more than enough parking, also meets natural resource protection standards. So in summary, it does meet the first required finding, which is compliance with the zoning code. The second required finding is that it meets the engineering standards, and that's Title 13 of City Code. At site plan, they conducted a public systems analysis. So that was done to confirm compliance with the engineering standards. So because there are only 3 new units and all the infrastructure is basically there already, very few things need to happen from an engineering perspective. They're limited to needing 3 new water meters, so that's 1 per cabin, as well as 1 fire hydrant. And their civil engineering plans are actually under review right now. No other infrastructure improvements are required because they were all put in place when Tract K was originally developed, when the clubhouse and everything else were built. So the last required finding is that they meet the subdivision standards, which is Title 11 of City Code. So they do, this plat does, so it met the preliminary plat procedures and application requirements. It also met the minimum required subdivision improvements, and those were identified in the public systems analysis that I discussed on the previous slide. Then the last part of this is that they meet the subdivision standards and regulations. Again, because this is very small, most of that doesn't apply, and they're not subdividing land, they're just creating ownership of these homes, the airspace ownership. So the only thing that really applies is a 20-foot public utility easement, which will be dedicated and which does meet those requirements for the compliance with the subdivision code. So in summary, both staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission have found that the preliminary plat meets the requirements of City Code, including Title 10, Flagstaff Zoning Code, Title 11, which is General Plans and Subdivisions, and Title 13, which is the Engineering Design Standards and Specifications. So staff recommends, based on the required findings and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation of approval, which is a 6-0 vote, that the City Council approve the preliminary plat. So that's all I have for my presentation, but the applicant is here. They can answer questions. I can also answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, do we have any comments, questions? All right. Well, Council, do we have a motion to approve?
Mayor, this is Jim McCarthy. I move that
So moved, Mayor.
All right, it sounds like Adam made the motion. I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Shimoni, seconded by Councilmember McCarthy. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Moving right along here down to now agenda item 7B. This is the consideration and adoption of ordinance number 2021-02, an ordinance of the Flagstaff City Council amending the Employee Handbook of Regulations as established by Flagstaff City Code, Chapter 1 through 14, Personnel System, Section 1-14-001-0001, Personnel System adopted. Staff recommendation is to read ordinance number 2021-02 by title only for the final time.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Jeannie Gallagher, your Human Resources Director. No presentation. This is a final read and request for adoption, but I'm here to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gallagher. Council, do we have any questions, comments? One sec here. All right, Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor, and hi, Ms. Gallagher. I'm going to keep my camera off because my connection's bad, but I would like to make a motion that we read ordinance number 2021-02 by title only for the final time.
I'll second that.
I have a motion from Councilmember Shimoni, seconded by Councilmember Aslan. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? All right, City Clerk.
Stacy, you're muted.
Man, thank you.
I should have let you go another 30 seconds.
She's normally the one who catches the rest of us.
I just needed some practice reading. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Flagstaff, Arizona, amending the Employee Handbook of Regulations relating to compensation and promotion as established by City Code Chapter 1-14 Personnel System, Section 1-14-001-0001, Personnel System adopted, providing for penalties, repeal of conflicting ordinances, severability, and establishing an effective date.
Oh, thank you, City Clerk. I motion to adopt. Do I have a second?
Second, Jim McCarthy.
All right, a motion from myself, seconded by Councilmember McCarthy. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. All right, and we're down now to agenda item 7C, the consideration of audited financial reports, year ending June 30th, 2020. Staff recommended action is to approve the fiscal year 2019 to 2020 comprehensive annual financial report and the fiscal year 2019-2020 single audit report.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. Brandy Suda, the city's Finance Director. I'm here before you tonight for the approval of the city's fiscal year 2019-2020 comprehensive financial report and single audit report. The city is required by Arizona revised statutes and city charter to perform an annual financial audit. In addition, the city is required to have a single audit because of the level of federal grants the city receives annually. Both the financial and single audit went very well for this year. I'm happy to report that there were no findings, material weaknesses, or significant deficiencies noted in the single audit. The audit committee met January 15th and unanimously approved both of these reports. And I would just like to take a moment to thank the finance team, the grants and contracts team, and the management services staff for their great work they did this year and all the great work they do every day for the city. And I am available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Suda. Council, do we have any questions regarding the audit report? Mr. Tatter.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Suda, for the comments. I also want to say thanks to the audit committee. We have a few members of the public who help us with the review of our audit reports. We have Dave Cosper, Sharman Kaywood, and Margaret Panato. And just a note that we did have Sharman Kaywood, who has been on our committee for quite a long time. There's no expiration of terms, but she's been a great help for us, and she's retiring from the audit committee. So definitely want to open that up to the public. If you're interested in participating, please apply for that vacancy. But we definitely appreciate the public's help.
Thank you, Mr. Tatter. Council, do we have any questions regarding this? Oh, okay. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Rick. I am not looking at it right now. I'm trying to find it, but there was somewhere within the documents where it noted that the city has won an award every year. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, Vice Mayor. We have, I'm going to probably get the number of years wrong, but we have received, I believe, for 24, maybe 25 years now, the GFOA, so it's the Government Officers, Financial Officers Association Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting. So we have received this award, I believe, 24, maybe 25 years consecutively.
That is excellent. Nice work, everyone. And also wanted to note, in addition, if citizens want to be a part of the audit committee, that the audit documents are also on our website if anyone wants to look through them. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember McCarthy?
Just a quick question. I know that last year that Charlie Odegaard was on the audit committee. Do we have a council member on the audit committee this year? Oh, Mr. Daisy.
Yep.
Great. I'm glad that we have council representation.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Paul.
My pleasure. I like numbers, so works out. All right, Council. Well, City Manager, do you have a comment?
Oh, just to follow up on the Vice Mayor's comment. Thank you so much, Vice Mayor, for calling out the GFOA awards. I'm just going to offer up some kudos to the budget team and specifically the finance team who's presenting to you today. No small lift on these budget processes, and that award that you spoke of is a bit of the gold standard with local government budgeting. So to have a squeaky clean audit coupled with 24 years in the running on these GFOA awards is a real testament to the folks over there in the finance department. So thanks for raising that, Vice Mayor, and well done, finance team.
Excellent. Well, without further ado then, I would like to put a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion for myself, seconded by Vice Mayor Daggett. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. All right, moving right along here. We're down to agenda item 8A. This is our public hearing items. And this is the consideration and adoption of ordinance number 2021-04, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Flagstaff amending the Flagstaff zoning map to rezone approximately 0.82 acres of real property generally located at 922 East Route 66 by adding a landmarks overlay district designation to the historic sign only within an existing highway commercial district zoning classification. Staff recommended actions to read ordinance number 2021-04 by title only for the first time. I'd like to open up this public hearing and city staff.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Hughes.
Sarah was going to introduce me.
Oh, sorry. I was on mute talking to myself. Thank you.
And can you see my screen?
Not yet, Mark. So first I'd like to introduce to the City Council Mark Revis, our Heritage Preservation Officer and Neighborhood Planner, who's been with the city for a year, and this is his first opportunity to present to City Council today. And so I wanted to take a minute to recognize that Mark has been with the city through a pretty rough first year, but he has brought an enormous amount of experience to our Heritage Preservation Program. And so with pleasure, I turn over to him the presentation of a new landmark overlay.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, can you see my screen?
I cannot.
Oh.
Just came up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the big screen or?
We're seeing the whole presentation. So with the next slide on the right and so forth as well.
Oh, I'm trying to do the slideshow.
Mark, I can share for you if you're running into a technical difficulty.
I am.
Let's see. Is my screen visible now?
It is, and thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Mark.
I love technical difficulties.
It's not a meeting in 2020 or 2021, so it's official. We're at a meeting.
Well, just let me know in advance the slides. Thank you.
This starting slide, as you indicated, Mr. Mayor, this is for the zoning landmark overlay amendment, and it is applicable to the sign only at the Whispering Winds Motel. This is PZ 20-00141-02, and I am Mark Revis. Please advance. I just wanted to note that this is an important aspect of the Heritage Preservation Program. It's defined in the municipal code, the purpose, and it is meant to protect cultural, historical, heritage resources in the city of Flagstaff. It's applicable to objects such as a sign, and it is particularly about how that is important to our community and the city's heritage, and it enhances the general welfare of the public. Heritage Preservation Program actually promotes local landmark designations and shepherds the application through the process and supports and pays the fees associated with the landmark zoning overlay so as to further enhance heritage preservation efforts. And I will be moving through these, Sarah. How is a sign determined to be significant? Again, I'll go through these slides. I know everybody's had a long day. Significant signs, they're at least 50 years of age. They are exemplary examples of craftsmanship and design. They're absolutely unique, and they're significant to the city streetscape. And as such, they are worthy of special recognition and may be designated as landmark properties in accordance with the provisions of this division. Why is a landmark overlay required for an individual signs of historic and cultural significance? The landmark overlay will allow for the continued utilization of the historic sign's remaining components and the sign's restoration to its original appearance, height, and area. Just to be sure, this provision of the code cannot be utilized to replicate a sign that no longer exists. It is only for the restoration of an existing historic sign. The property is at 922 East Route 66. Again, to be very clear that this is part of the sign ordinance 10.50.100.02, and that is applicable as well to the provisions of designated a landmark in the Heritage Preservation Program, which is 1030.30. There were considerations to the dark sky compliance, even though that isn't required in the full restoration. The location of the sign is on Route 66 between the mortuary and the Hotel Aspen Inn. We move on to the next one, unless anybody has questions. The designation for identification purposes is the whole property, but it is only applicable to the sign itself. owner is indicated here. The existing use is a motel. It will continue to be utilized as a motel. The condition of the motel is in current use, is undergoing interior room restoration. The motel is really an exceptional example of 1960s modern architectural design, and it retains its form and its architectural features. The sign, though, has suffered from weather exposure, some modifications, and the loss of the upper portion of the sign, this oval portion. There's kind of a close-up of the motel in the background, iconic 1964 motor hotel. You can see the sign is slightly injured, and if you look closely at where it says Whispering Winds Motel, that is kind of an add-on. It took place after the upper. Onto the next. We City of Flagstaff has a program for grants for facades and signs specifically. The sign grant was approved by the Heritage Preservation Commission. Aspects to fully restore this sign are adding the missing upper oval to the sign, removing that box above the reader board, and then full restoration, including the colors associated with the motel. That is the proposed design for the sign. There's that missing oval that says Whispering Winds Motel. It was documented by a postcard image on the lower right, and that meets our requirements for restoring a sign to its original condition. The historic preservation is an incentive grant. It is funded by BBB tax, and it is up to $10,000 at a 50-50 matching basis. The full restoration of this sign is over $30,000. So the program is providing up to $10,000 match. Heritage Preservation grant incentive is specific for buildings, structures, and objects such as this sign, and it supports economic vitality. And in particular, I think the owners of the motel understand that this is going to be really important for heritage tourism as Route 66 becomes more and more popular and nostalgic. It is helping foster improvements to that property. Previous HPC decisions and updates. You can see this has been a fairly long process, so grant review started in August of 2020. We can move on to the next slide unless there's any questions. In order to approve this overlay, finding number 1, is it in conformance with goals and policies of the general plan? It does follow those general plan specifics, but more particularly, Goal CC.3, Design Traditions in Flagstaff, Policy 3.1 and 3.2, excuse me, for context and documented evidence of the sign's general design with photo documentation for the sign restoration and consistent with surrounding development in Route 66, as well as considerations of the streetscape. Thanks. Move on to the next. The proposed amendment must be determined to add to the public good. I think Route 66 is fully recognized by the state and a national level for its significance. It is a priority of the Heritage Preservation Program. And again, National Scenic Byway and an all-American road. And the HPC did find concurrence with those determinations. In consideration, finding 3 of public safety. Again, it is just the landmark is applied to the sign itself and really has no impact adverse to public safety. The HPC, just to go over this again, 10-30.30.040E, it was met. It was determined to be a significant sign of 50 years of age. exemplary craftsmanship, uniqueness, determined to be a significant sign on historic Route 66 and adds to the city's streetscape, and is worthy of special recognition as a landmark property. Heritage Preservation Commission recommended Planning and Zoning Commission forward the request to the City Council with a recommendation approving this application. It was subject to the condition that it must be developed in accordance with the approved sign grant application, and that any future alterations must be reviewed by the HPO. More specific language defining the property itself and adding a landmark designation to the existing HC classification, that it did meet the requirements of both the sign ordinance, those provisions within the sign ordinance, and also the provisions within Heritage Preservation 10-30.30, and that it is being designated as a landmark property and following the requirements for adding an overlay zone to that property. And then also the waiver needs to be signed. Planning and Zoning Commission has forwarded the request to the council with a recommendation to approve PZ 20-00141-02 per stated conditions there. Any questions, please?
Thank you, Mr. Avis. Council, do we have questions, comments? Councilmember McCarthy.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I will admit that at first I had some serious reservations about this. And the reasons I did is I know that the city has spent a lot of money and time and effort to get rid of the billboards along Route 66. Most of you aren't old enough to remember, but it was pretty ugly. The other thing is that the city has spent a lot of time and effort to try to get commercial establishments to move to the new sign code, which this would not be allowed under. However, I will say that I had some conversations over the weekend and yesterday with Mark and Sarah, and I want to thank both of you for the time to answer my questions. And what I came to understand is that, say, if this were on South Milton, it would be completely inappropriate. But Route 66 has been designated as a historic route and one of very few historic highways in the United States, and that the National Park Service is actually behind the effort to try to restore and to maintain this as an historic road. So with that in consideration of what I learned, I'm going to support this this effort and this amendment to the zoning code. So again, thank you, Sarah and Mark, for the time you spent with me yesterday. You guys are pretty persuasive. You won me over. Well, I think it's good that we think things through before we just blindly say yes. And we did that in this case. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Do we have any other questions or comments of Ms. Decter and Mr. Avis? All right, City Clerk, do we have any public participants for this public hearing?
Not for this item, Mayor.
All right, well, if that is the case, Councilmember Salas, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to bring to everyone's attention that this year we are celebrating 95 years of the historic Route 66, and recently, you know, on Christmas Eve, the Route 66 Centennial Commission was signed into law. in preparation for the centennial celebration of Route 66 in 2026. The commission is charged with raising awareness and funds to carry out projects that preserve, promote, and economically develop Route 66. Also, for everyone's information, we have a huge following, and when it's safe to travel again, we will have influx of domestic and international travelers and visitors who wanna drive through West routes, not only West, but West and East Route 66, but throughout Route 66 as much as they can. So, and I am ready to make a motion after further questions and comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. Do we have any further questions or comments at this time? I'm not seeing anything, so at this time I'd like to close the public hearing. And I heard a motion from Councilmember Salas. Do I have a second? Vice Mayor.
Go ahead.
I will second that.
I didn't actually, Mayor, I think Ms. Salas needs to be able to state her motion. She said she was ready to make one, but not what it was. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I moved to read ordinance number 2021-04 by title only for the first time.
All right, I have a motion from Councilmember Salas, and
I second that.
It's seconded by Vice Mayor Daggett. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion carries unanimously. City Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Flagstaff amending the Flagstaff zoning map to rezone approximately 0.82 acres of real property generally located at 922 East Route 66 by adding a Landmarks Overlay District designation, LO, to the existing Highway Commercial District, HC, zoning classification, providing for severability, clerical corrections, and establishing an effective date.
Excellent. All right, then we are now down to agenda item 9A, it's our regular agenda, or consideration and adoption of resolution number 2021-09, a resolution of the Flagstaff City Council approving an intergovernmental agreement between the Coconino County Community College District and the City of Flagstaff to share fire training and education resources. Staff recommended action is to read resolution number 2021-09 by title only.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. Mark Wilson, Deputy Chief with the Flagstaff Fire Department. We don't have an official slide presentation for you this evening. What we do have is this is an ongoing intergovernmental agreement between the Flagstaff Fire Department and Coconino Community College that's really shown excellent benefits to both parties. And it continues to be a great partnership between the City of Flagstaff and one of our local educational partners. So I really appreciate your time, and I'm available if you have any specific questions that relate to this agreement.
Excellent, thank you much. Council, do we have any questions regarding this? All right, well, if that's the case, I would like to motion to read resolution number 2021-09 by title only. Do I have a second?
This is Councilmember Sweet. I second that.
I have a motion by myself, seconded by Councilmember Sweet. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. City Clerk.
A resolution of the Flagstaff City Council approving an intergovernmental agreement between the Coconino County Community College District and the City of Flagstaff for sharing of resources.
All right, well then I am motion to adopt resolution number 2021-09.
Second.
I have a motion by myself, seconded by Councilmember McCarthy. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Down to agenda item 9B. This is the consideration and adoption of resolution number 2021-10, a resolution of the Flagstaff City Council approving amendment number 1 to an intergovernmental agreement number 19-0007325 and resolution 2019-51 IGA between the State of Arizona Department of Transportation and the City of Flagstaff to include the replacement of Portland cement concrete pavement within ADOT's bridge replacement project. Staff recommended action is to read resolution number 2021-10 by title only.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of council. This is Trevor Henry with the Capital Improvements Program. Tonight, or this afternoon, I'll be presenting this item. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video so that I can go ahead and share my presentation. Right. Does everybody see the presentation?
It is there.
Yep, I'm seeing it.
Okay, thank you. So this item before you is an amendment to the original IGA between the state of Arizona and the city of Flagstaff. As I go forward with the presentation, I'll refer to the state of Arizona as just the state and the city of Flagstaff as the city. So here is a context map for the state's bridge replacement project. The state project is just south of City Hall and the downtown area. This is the vicinity map, which shows the location of the state's bridge project in the downtown area. The bridge that is being replaced spans the Rio de Flag Channel, which is just west of City Hall. The bridge that is being replaced services Route 66, which is also identified as Business Route 40. Route 66 is within the state's right-of-way. So let me provide some background on the original IGA. The state and the city agreed to this IGA. It was presented to the City Council under Resolution 2019-51 in October of 2019. The resolution was approved on October 15th. The IGA was executed by the state on November 14th. The original IGA included work that would support the future Rio de Flag project. The Rio de Flag project scope in this area includes an underground drainage structure and a pedestrian path that is beneath the state's bridge. The work that will support the Rio project includes excavating material beneath the state's bridge. The estimation at this time in this area will comprise of rock. The depth of excavation is approximately 20 feet below the existing channel grade of the Rio de Flag. Also included is backfilling this area with excavated material, engineered material. This will allow the area to be what we call in construction easy digging for the Rio project. Also included in the IGA was advertising, bidding, and awarding of the work into the state's bridge replacement project. The total amount that the city contributed towards the original IGA was $677,538. This amount was funded by the Rio de Flag flood control project. The amount was based on an estimate provided by the state. The estimate included rock excavation, traffic control, police, flagging services, and the backfill. There was also construction engineering and contingency costs that the state typically includes. Also included were indirect costs that were added to the estimate. After the original IGA was approved, the city programmed and performed a utility relocation project in the area of the state's existing bridge. This project would support the Rio project and the state's bridge replacement project. within the limits of both projects are public utilities, such as reclaimed water, wastewater, and stormwater. The mains are in conflict with both projects, and it is the city's responsibility to address and relocate as needed. In other words, the city needed to provide a clear corridor for both projects. The city procured construction services for the utility relocations, and that was performed in March of 2020. Included in the construction was the replacement of Portland cement concrete pavement in Route 66. Again, going forward in the presentation, I'll refer to the PCCP as just concrete pavement. Due to limitations, the concrete pavement was not completed. There was concerns related to traffic detours and means to successfully cure the concrete pavement. These limitations were discussed with the state, and they concurred. Therefore, the city made a request to the state to include the concrete pavement into the state's project, the bridge replacement project. The cost of the work would be absorbed into the original contribution amount. This is why and how amendment number 1 originated. The cost of the work is $48,980.47, and this is based on a proposal received from the state's contractor. The state has reviewed and verified the cost. There will be no additional costs to the Rio project for amendment number 1. Amendment number 1 will be complete with the reading and adoption of Resolution 2021-10. The work described in Amendment number 1 was presented to the city's change order committee on February 4th. The state's change order was approved and endorsed by the change order committee to authorize the state to move forward, and we also recommended presenting to council. At this time, the state's change, which is for the concrete pavement, is covered by amendment number 1 as presented tonight or this afternoon. Upon approval of amendment number 1, it will approve the concrete pavement work, and it will also complete the city's responsibility. And with that, I conclude the presentation, and I'm here for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Council, do we have questions at this time? I'm not seeing any questions at this time. Council, then do we have a motion?
I'm happy to make a motion.
Oh, he beat you to it, Vice Mayor.
All right, I'll second.
I have a motion to read resolution number 2021-10 by title only by Councilmember Aslan, seconded by Vice Mayor Daggett. Is there any further discussion?
For specifying that.
Yep, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. City Clerk.
A resolution of the Flagstaff City Council approving Amendment Number 1 to Intergovernmental Agreement 19-000-7325-I, previously approved through Resolution 2019-51, between the State of Arizona Department of Transportation and the City of Flagstaff to include the replacement of Portland cement concrete pavement within the Arizona Department of Transportation's Bridge Replacement Project.
Thank you, City Clerk. Do we have a motion to adopt resolution number 2021-10?
I'll move that we adopt resolution number 2021-10.
All right, I'll second that motion. So we have a first by Vice Mayor Deckard, seconded by myself. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. At this point in time, I think it would be good to take a little bit of break before we get into the recreational marijuana ordinance, which will be next on the agenda. Let's freshen up here with our water bottles and so forth and be back here at 4:35. So 13 minutes, 4:35. Excellent. We are now down to agenda item 9C. This is the consideration and adoption of ordinance number 2021-03, an ordinance of the City Council and the City of Flagstaff, Arizona, amending the Flagstaff City Code Title 6, Police Regulations by adopting a new Chapter 6 through 10, Regulation of Recreational Marijuana. City staff.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This is Kevin Finsel, Deputy City Attorney. I'll be presenting on this item. I'll also be joined by Mary Ann Sullivan, Senior Assistant City Attorney, as well as Brent Harris, our City Prosecutor. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Mayor, can you see that?
Yes, we're good.
All right. So this will be the beginning part of this discussion will be a repeat of what we discussed in the work session. So I'll provide an overview of the Smart and Safe Arizona Act, a little bit of history, discuss the key provisions. Mary Ann Sullivan will jump in and talk about some of the enforcement issues. And then we'll review prior council direction that was given at that work session, and then move on to a first read of the proposed ordinance. So the Smart and Safe Arizona Act was certified as Proposition 207. This was a statewide voter initiative. It was passed by Arizona voters on November 3rd, 2020. It was passed with 60% saying yes, 40% saying no. Statewide here in Coconino County, we had 65% people supporting this and 35% saying no. The law became effective on December 1st, 2020. And generally, really what the act did is it declared that the responsible use of marijuana should be legal for persons 21 years and older, subject to, of course, some state regulation, taxation, and then some local ordinance or local regulations that cities have the option to adopt. So some of the key provisions here, it does authorize the sale of marijuana to adults who are at least 21 years of age. It authorizes adults over age 21 to possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana for recreational use. It also authorizes adults over age 21 to transport, cultivate, and process up to 6 marijuana plants. So people can actually grow marijuana at their residence, but no more than 12 plants at a single residence. Cultivation at home must be in an enclosed, secured area, not visible from public view. Few things the act does not do. So it does not allow individuals to smoke marijuana in a public or open space. So a public place is defined in the act, and that really includes restaurants, any place that the public is invited, restaurants, bars, shopping centers, other shops in town. Open space is defined as, streets, thoroughfares, parks. So really, I think the intent here is to allow the smoking or use of marijuana in private residence or at home. The act also does not allow individuals to consume marijuana or marijuana products in a vehicle. And it does not restrict the ability of any person or business from prohibiting or regulating the use of marijuana on their property. So private property owners can restrict it. And it definitely does not decriminalize driving while impaired by marijuana. So driving while impaired by marijuana is still illegal. What the act also does is it authorizes cities to adopt certain regulations. So some of the things cities are allowed to do, cities can prohibit or limit the number of recreational marijuana establishments, within one exception. For medical marijuana establishments, they are allowed to be dual licensees. So if you have a medical marijuana establishment in your locality, you can't prohibit them from proceeding to also sell recreational marijuana. Cities are also allowed to prohibit or limit the number of recreational marijuana testing facilities, as well as prohibit marijuana possession, sale, and use on city property. Cities can also restrict delivery of marijuana. However, we talked about this at the work session. Delivery is actually unlawful under the state law until at least 2023, when the department is able to adopt regulations for delivery. Those regulations can be adopted starting in 2023, but must be adopted by 2025. So we do have a little bit of time there. And then cities can also enact reasonable zoning regulations for recreational marijuana establishments, but those regulations can't be stricter than the regulations for medical marijuana. So now jumping into some enforcement issues, I'll turn this over to Mary Ann Sullivan, and she'll take it from here. Mary Ann, are you on? Well, I will jump in for Mary Ann then. Mary Ann, if you come on, feel free to jump in. So one thing we noticed with the act is there are a couple items actually that are not allowed under
Kevin?
the act. Yes.
Kevin? I'm sorry. I'm now in. I'm sorry. My computer wasn't working and I had to dial in.
All right, take it from here.
Well, where were you? Because I missed everything.
I'm on the enforcement issues. So can you see the slide?
Okay. Nope, not at all.
Okay. Well, then why don't I just take it from here, and you can respond to any questions we may get.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. So as I was saying, there were a couple items that are prohibited under the act, but did not carry over into the act's violations section. These two items were the prohibition on consumption in a motor vehicle and the prohibition on cultivating or possessing more than 12 plants. So at the work session, we discussed this, and staff recommended adding these as violations in our city ordinance. Another item, and this is new, we did not discuss this at the work session, but this came through a discussion with Mary Ann, and I'll tee it off and let Mary Ann give a little more detail here. But one thing that we wanted to add to the ordinance was a requirement that people who are stopped or legally stopped for a potential violation of the ordinance or the law under the act provide accurate personal information to police officers. So Mary Ann, do you want to touch on that a little bit, why that's important?
Sure, thank you. So one of the reasons that's important is because there is a provision in Title 13, which is our state criminal code, that does require somebody to identify themselves when they have been stopped by law enforcement based on reasonable suspicion that they have committed a crime. Part of the Prop 207 does include, criminal violations, but also includes civil violations, specifically for those who are under 21 in possession of marijuana and or drug paraphernalia. The first offense for those individuals is a civil offense. And so we wanted to give officers the ability to stop and investigate those cases and those individuals if necessary, but they can't do that and require them to give their name and date of birth under the Title 13 provision. So this is similar to a provision we created in our electronic bicycle ordinance as well, to allow officers to have the ability to compel somebody to provide their correct name and date of birth and current address so that enforcement of the ordinances can take place. And so that is why we're proposing that be added to this ordinance that we're developing so that it's clear that officers have the ability to compel somebody to provide their accurate name, date of birth, and current address so that they can be cited if necessary, or at least identified to determine if they can legally possess marijuana under Prop 207.
Thank you, Mary Ann. So moving on to the next piece of the presentation. So we have up here on the screen, and we show this at the work session. This is a chart Mary Ann created showing the different penalties under the Act. And not only the Recreational Marijuana Act, but I think she has the medical marijuana on here as well. I don't think we need to walk through these again. We just left these in here in case we got any questions or received any questions from council about any of the penalties. So going to the work session. So we had the work session on January 12th, and council gave the following direction. Council did not want to limit recreational establishments to dual licensees. Council also gave direction to not prohibit testing facilities. With respect to delivery, council decided to wait until give it a little bit more time and then come back closer to 2023, I assume, when those delivery regulations from the state come down, and then we can decide how to amend our ordinance with respect to delivery. Council did instruct staff to prohibit consuming, growing, transferring, selling of marijuana on city property, but also asked us to look into a possible exception for city housing facilities. Also gave direction to prohibit use on private property if posted, and to add the violations, as we just discussed, that did not carry over in the act, and make the penalties for those two violations consistent with other penalties we see in the act. Same zoning as applied to medical establishments was also the direction, although we won't be talking about that today. That'll be coming back to you with some proposed amendments from CD. So the proposed ordinance, of course, reflects the prior council direction. With respect to the exception for the use in city housing facilities, so you do not see that exception in the ordinance in front of you tonight. We looked into that. We consulted with housing staff, and we reviewed the federal housing laws that were applicable to this situation, as well as specific guidance from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And we determined that an exception to allow the use of marijuana in our city housing facilities would conflict with those applicable federal laws and HUD guidance. So in light of that, we did not add that exception. We did add the requirement Marianne just talked about, that individuals lawfully detained provide full name, date of birth, and current address. And like I just said, the zoning amendments will be coming back to you at a later date, and they will just align the current zoning requirements for medical marijuana, align those with the recreational establishments. So that's everything I have for you tonight. Of course, here to answer any questions. If you have any questions about the proposed ordinance, Marianne, myself, and Brent are here.
Thank you, Mr. Fenslow. I understand we have one public speaker. If you'd like to patch them in, Ms. Fobar, that would be great.
Ms. Carver, you can go ahead and speak.
Hi, my name is Bernice Carver. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I've lived in Flagstaff for 44 years. I've worked for the school district and the health department and other organizations in town. I was on the committee for our smoke-free air laws for the county and the city, and I was on the board for Smoke-Free Arizona and helped write Smoke-Free Arizona as well as our local ordinances. I would like to urge you to take a step back and look at what other cities and counties are doing as far as restricting the marijuana establishments, as well as the licensing and the testing facilities. We've all heard horror stories about how high THC marijuana, and many of us have a lot of tragic personal stories. I personally know of 3 families who have already lost their sons to suicide locally to high THC marijuana. I have family and friends in California, Nevada, Colorado, and Washington. There they've experienced dramatic increases in drug addictions, hospitalizations, crime, homelessness, child abuse, foster care, domestic violence, car crashes, and an increase in the black market and gang activity. The tobacco industry is now in business with the marijuana industry. Philip Morris, which is also known as Altria now, is now heavily invested in marijuana. They will try to use veterans, homeless people, elderly, people, the American flag, and others to pull at our heartstrings to protect their right to sell marijuana and enslave more users into addiction to make more profits. Prop 207, the Smart and Safe Marijuana Act, is not smart and it's not safe. I worked at the poll at NAU and saw lines around the blocks. I would think that a lot of students were the ones that pushed the marijuana over the top, and a lot of people voted for it not knowing what the actual initiative actually said. They only knew what it said in the voter pamphlet. The Smart and Safe Arizona Act allows cities and towns and counties to prohibit marijuana establishments and delivery and regulate other things. And I'd like to point out that medical marijuana already has delivery. I really think it would be a good idea to take a look at this and look at Camp Verde's ordinance. We could limit the amount of medical establishments and
I'm sorry, ma'am, time is up.
confine the recreational to the medical establishments for oversight.
Ms. Carver, your time is up.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Carver.
Thank you.
Council, do we have any questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Carver. All right, with that, I will turn it in here to council discussion. Do we have any questions for Mr. Fensel or additional comments? I do have a few, but thought I'd put, this before the council first. All right then. Oh, Councilmember Shimoni. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Fensel and Marianne. Couple questions. So I guess I'm still confused about the proposed fine schedule or the fee schedule. Maybe you can go back to that slide, but I'm wondering if anyone on this call from staff knew about any sort of alternatives to a fine schedule that we could potentially implement here. That obviously won't be taking us out of compliance with state law or with the will of the voters, but rather than just adding another fine schedule onto, the work plate of our prosecutors and our courts, and rather than running folks who are in violation through our courts, I'm just wondering if there's another approach that we can look into.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. I'll turn that question over to Marianne. She can respond, and then maybe Brent can chime in as well. Marianne?
Thank you, Kevin. So the fine schedule or the fees or penalties for proposed violations in Prop 207. I don't know, Kevin, if you're showing the chart that I created, but what that shows is that for certain violations under the state law, it's either a petty offense or it is for those under 21, either a civil penalty of $100, then a petty offense, and then a misdemeanor offense. And so what we are proposing for the city ordinance for those areas that were basically kind of left out of the violation section of the state law is the same penalties. And so the penalty would be, it's either the civil penalty of a $100 fine, the petty offense, or the misdemeanor offense. And in our local city ordinances, when we designate something as a misdemeanor offense or a petty offense, ultimately what ends up happening is any sort of penalty is up to the judge. The state law has the parameters, which can be no fine up to $300 for the petty offense, and then for the different classes of misdemeanors, again, it's no fine up to the certain amounts for the class 1, 2, and 3, including the jail time. There's absolutely no jail time for a petty offense. So in terms of any sort of schedule, there really isn't one, because the penalty for those offenses are up to the courts if somebody is found guilty of those offenses in the courtroom. The only real schedule that is being proposed in the state law and in our proposed ordinance would be the civil penalty of the $100 fine, which really is the lowest amount that you would ever really see kind of in a penalty section like this. So what we have done previously in other ordinances that the council has seen, specifically the one I can think of is our party nuisance, where we have a set schedule of fees. So we're not really doing a set schedule of fees, and what this would allow, if somebody is convicted in court of the petty offense or misdemeanor, would be for the court to fashion the appropriate penalty and remedy, which could be community service, it could be a fine, and then for misdemeanor offenses, jail time if that's appropriate. But again, so this would allow a sentence and penalty to be imposed that the court would decide situations.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Brent, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add a couple of comments. Thank you very much, esteemed mayor and council. So as far as I've been able to determine, the petty offenses don't stack. This was a question we got asked earlier. If you get a certain number of petty offenses, do they turn into class 3 misdemeanor, class 2 misdemeanor? I haven't seen anything that enables us to, I guess, stack up or rack up the penalties on those cases for petty offenses. We also need to look at Prop 207 in light of Prop 200, which is probably 20 years old at this point, that doesn't allow jail for drug offenses unless the person refuses or fails probation anyways. So in any scheme or criminal justice regimen under the whole marijuana issue, people are not going to go to jail on these charges. Similarly with civil offenses, people don't go to jail for not paying civil fines. With regard to the question on pre-arrest diversion, is there a non-criminal justice situation? I certainly hope so. I appreciate the sentiment about not adding work to either the overburdened courts or my overwhelmed offices. And there are city programs and city teams working on some pre-arrest diversion options, both at the city level, the county level, and the Coconino County Criminal Justice Coordinating Commission level. So there are efforts being made. But, I've described this to some people as asking a plumber a question about a masonry issue. I hope that there are non-criminal options available to us, but I think that's something that the electeds in the city manager's office, in conjunction with their constituents in the community, might want to work on. With the fines regarding the $100 fine, my understanding from the courts is that we can't go lower than $100, or the court ends up having to pay the state court system out of their own budget and their own pocket if we have fines that go lower than that. Even a fine of $1 with fees and surcharges ends up being $100. And I'd be happy to have somebody from court weigh in if I'm incorrect on that, but that's my understanding. And then my office has always been very pro community service. We believe that the best thing that a person, especially a person of limited financial means, can do if they're not working, if they're not gainfully employed, would be to do community service. But COVID has absolutely crushed our ability to do community service. We used to have people going to the food bank, going to the shelter, stuffing envelopes at City Hall back in the day. I mean, we had a lot of options available, but COVID has really curtailed a whole lot of those options. So we're open to options and we're looking at options. And my understanding, both from Flag PD and my office, is, it's public education, it's public awareness, it's diverting everything possible. This is not a money-making engine. This is not a scheme to fill the coffers of the city of Flagstaff. What we are trying to do is listen to the will of the voters, and I believe that in Coconino County, 65% yay and 35% nay sends a strong message to my office and to Flag PD that we don't need to go searching out these cases. We don't need to crack down or punish these people. We're going to treat them as civil offenses. We're going to treat them as petty offenses if the situation requires. But we're going to do the best that we can in all circumstances to pursue justice. And I'd be happy to answer any follow-ups or preferably defer to Mary Ann.
That's great. And thank you, Ms. Sullivan and Mr. Harris, for your insights. Council, I think that there are alternatives that we should consider. And I think that, just because we typically go through the courts doesn't mean we should. And I think that our court system is overtaxed and has a significant backlog. And I just don't necessarily think that the will of the voters is for penalties to this to go through the courts per se. So Mayor and Council, I don't know how others feel about this, but maybe weigh in, and I think between the first and second read, we can explore some alternatives if there's council direction. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. So these violations, though, am I incorrect in saying are what is in the state law already? That it's already outlined, it's civil violation, et cetera?
This is Brent Harrison. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so this is just, reaffirming what was already in there at the state level. And I guess on that note, is there, if we do it differently, doesn't that open us up to potential violations ourselves if we decide not to put in as a petty offense or anything to that effect? Or how would that work?
So Mayor, this is Kevin Finsel. Just to clarify, so there are certain violations in the Act. So what you see on the screen here, what Mary Ann put together, these are actually in the Act, but we added to our ordinance for two violations, the ones that didn't make it over into the violation section in the Act, and that's for the use or consumption in a vehicle, and then also for the possession of more than 12 plants. So they didn't have those in the violation section of the Act. So that's what we added them to the ordinance. So there we have a little more leeway on what we want to do. So that's why in the work session we came to council and said, what do you want those penalties to look at? And the direction was to make the penalties similar to the Act. So that's what we did. But if council wants to take a different direction and work on a different scheme for those two violations, we have leeway to do that. With respect to the structure under the Act, we really can't do much there. That's going to be more with the courts and with Brent's teams on deciding, what to recommend as a penalty. That would be what Brent's team would do, and then ultimately the judge would make that decision.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I would be okay with looking at some alternative options, but it seems like at least what I'm looking at here with the under 21, for example, we don't have much that we can change right there aside from, potentially a diversion program or whatnot, but in terms of codifying the ordinance. Ms. Sullivan, do you have a comment?
Yes, just to add that if we were to do something specifically, if you're talking about the violation that didn't carry over with regard to the 12 plants, if we did something different than what is in Prop 207, then if somebody was in violation of Prop 207 where they had they weren't allowed to have 6 plants because they're under 21 and they have 6 plants, then their penalty would be what is indicated for the state statute. But then if you have somebody who has more than 12 plants, if we do something different, then the penalties are going to be different. And so I don't know if that's a consideration that the council wants to have in terms of consistency in penalties for very similar violations. And the same thing if you have somebody smoking in public and you have certain penalties, but then if they're smoking in a vehicle, you would have, again, just pointing it out to council that if we did do something different for those 2 violations that simply didn't carry over, it would be, inconsistent with state law in the sense that we could get something more lenient for those 2 violations simply because they were mistakenly left out of the violation section of the state law that we've decided to add, into our city ordinance for consistency purposes and to implement actually the intent of the statute, because those 2 things in the other section of Prop 207, it specifically says you're not allowed to do them. They just weren't carried over into the violation section. So the intent was that they were not allowed under the Act, and then they were left out. So the intent, seems to be that they should have those same or similar penalties for those 2 particular things. With regard to what's already in Prop 207, which was everything on that chart that we previously had up, we can't change those penalties.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Mr. Fensel, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out one other thing, and that's so I have up on the screen, hopefully, Mayor, you can see that. So this is the ordinance. Is that what you're seeing on your screen now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and like you said, this is consistent with the chart that we had up, which is those are the penalties in the act. And one thing to focus on here is that when we talk about the civil penalty and then going to a petty offense and then going to a class 1 misdemeanor, just a reminder that those are for violations for people under 21. Those are for people who aren't, just smoking in the wrong place or smoking in a vehicle when they shouldn't be. These are people who shouldn't be smoking at all. And that's why I think the act, differentiated between those two classes here. So, I understand that the move to want to lessen it, but I do think that's what the act was trying to do is to create a little more stiffer punishment and that gradually increasing punishment for people under the age of 21.
Right. Thank you. Councilmember Shimoni has a follow-up question on this. And then Vice Mayor, I'll have a question here.
Really quick. So, Mr. Finsel and Ms. Sullivan, so what I'm hearing from you all is that the fee schedule and the penalty schedule or penalty format of which we have to follow is already written out in the proposition that passed, and that we can't necessarily go a different direction other than with those two categories, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Councilmember.
Okay, so in understanding that, then I think my comments aren't really really what I was hoping they would be, because just for those two categories of 12 plants and above and driving, that's, I don't know. I'm open to hear what council thinks, but I was hoping we could kind of just determine how we wanted to handle these violations as a city. But now learning that we are constricted in those efforts, I guess I kind of take back my comments. But thank you, Mayor, and thank you, staff.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mr. Harris, do you have a comment on this?
I just wanted to point out the not more than $100 language. So the court is well within its right to impose a penalty of $0, $10, $100. And then traditionally the court has, I guess, weighed out community service at $10 an hour. So the court could, within its right, as far as I understand and believe, could do 10 hours of community service in lieu of any sort of financial penalty. In a non-COVID world, that's a lot easier to do. But practically speaking, the fine literally could be $0, and the court would be well within its jurisdiction to do that.
Mayor, can I ask a quick question of Mr. Harris?
Yeah, real quick. I want to get to Vice Mayor too. She had a question a while ago.
So, Mr. Harris, if I'm hearing you correctly, would council have any role in that? I would guess that would be totally on the courts.
I think so. You're, Mr. Council Member. I think I almost called you Your Honor. I was in court all day. Sorry. So, yes, it's within the court's purview. And my office doesn't participate in civil cases anyways, so there's not going to be a prosecutor in there in all likelihood advocating for any sort of penalty, much less a penalty at the maximum or whatever. We don't participate in the vast majority of civil traffic hearings. We're not going to treat these as different than a civil traffic hearing. Civil is civil. We don't have a history of prosecuting petty offenses. So it's not likely until the third or subsequent violation, which becomes a class 1 misdemeanor, that the city prosecutor's office is even going to be involving itself in these cases. And so we believe that's a situation where city council could provide direction of what the city's policies or preferences are to the court, but the court ultimately is its own branch of government, and it's going to be able to do what it needs to do within the confines of the law.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Can someone refresh my memory and give me a couple of scenarios on what constitutes or what might constitute a testing facility?
Sure. So my understanding, this is Kevin Fensel, my understanding of a testing facility is where marijuana products that are going to be sold are tested for the content of of the marijuana or the THC. So that's my understanding of what a testing facility is. We currently don't have one in the Flagstaff area. I believe there's likely one in the valley, but there's not one up here right now.
Okay, so a testing facility might also be considered a place of manufacture of goods to be sold in the city limits, correct?
I do not believe so. And Dan Seimer's saying he is available. Maybe Dan has a little more information, but that's not my understanding. Dan, can you answer that?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Dan Seimer, Zoning Code Administrator, Zoning Code Manager. The testing facilities are, under the state law, are limited only to those facilities that test for the THCs, and there's two other chemical components that the testing facilities test for. And they also test for harmful contaminants. Outside of that, they are not allowed to manufacture, sell, or grow the marijuana, nor is a dispensary or what's called under the state law a manufacturing facility. It's kind of goofy. There's a little bit of differences between medical and recreational as it pertains to these things, but the testing facilities are only those locations that test for purity and levels, and that's it. Is there anything else I can answer as it pertains to that?
No, I don't think so. I'm wondering in real life what made this important enough for them to include it in what was put on the ballot. I guess I'm maybe not understanding the importance of a testing facility or why it's included.
I cannot give a specific answer to that, although my own recollection of the medical marijuana was to ensure that the patients and the consumers knew how much THC and other chemicals were in that product, and more importantly was the harmful contaminants. Now that's going back a number of years, so that's just based on my best recollection.
Well, that makes more sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seimer. Council, if you want to weigh in here, I will just note two things that I'd like to propose. One of them is basically with this industry going to be rapidly growing quickly, and a lot of people with pockets looking to what this industry is going to look like in Arizona. I am concerned of the monopolization of the recreational marijuana in Arizona and what all that entails, and would like to suggest, if possible, if we could look at this from legal, to disallow licenses in city limits for those who have licenses in other cities. So if somebody has a shop in Phoenix, then they can't get another license here or here in Flagstaff to be able to set up shop here. I don't know if you could speak to that. Is that a possibility legal before I ask council members to see if they'd be interested in it?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm actually just going to pull up the state statute here. I just wanted to take a quick look at that. I mean, it says localities may limit the number of marijuana establishments. It's pretty much all it says about that. It can also prohibit marijuana establishments. So I think your idea would be to drop into the ordinance I guess where I would start is probably going back to the language we had before, which limited the establishments to dual licensees, because we can't do anything about those. Mm-hmm. And then adding a provision that we would allow additional recreational marijuana establishments to licensees who do not possess another recreational or medical marijuana license. Is that where you're going there?
Yes, exactly. That if, let's keep it mom and pops. Let's figure out a way at the local level. And, if council would be willing to do that and we get something in order, this is something we could spread to other localities who'd be interested in this and make sure that we don't turn, that we keep them mom and pop stores. If we can keep that and make that happen through local ordinances and coordinating with potentially other cities, if we're good on it on home court, I'll start making calls. But yeah, I guess council, what are your thoughts on that and preventing single corporation from having the licenses in all the cities? Councilmember Aslan.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that's a really interesting idea. For the record, I want to be clear that I had issues with allowing dual licensees in Flagstaff, and I'm not going to stand in the way of the passing of this ordinance by any means. But I am concerned about the pace at which we invite all of this into our local community. I think it's worthy of seeing what happens, but taking it as slowly as we need to right now. I do agree with the logic and the conventional wisdom that it's easier to let off the brakes a little bit than it is to put the genie back in the bottle if we open things up too quickly and too widely. And this sounds to me like one of those ways in which we might be able to limit the number of operations that are coming into Flagstaff. I do like the idea of keeping it local or mom and pop, as you say. I think there might be other little devils in the details there that'll be interesting to feel out. But I'm open to the idea in general, specifically as a way to invite council to find ways to limit the speed of the rollout of all of this, and to make those opportunities available for our local community, and not just have this become a predatory endeavor from the outside. I will repeat again too that I don't think we should be doing any of this with anyone's pockets or pocketbooks in mind. This, to me, what's happening here is I don't see it as an opportunity to generate copious amounts of revenue for the city of Flagstaff. I'm actually fairly hesitant to go down this road, but the voters have spoken, and I'm curious to see where all this goes. I just think we need to be very measured and metered in our approach, at least at first. There's nothing wrong with letting off the brakes a little bit later on down the road. It's going to be harder to put the brakes back on if we're finding that we're doing something that we might be regretting as a community. So just taking the cautious approach, not trying to say no or to not move forward on this, but just doing it cautiously. I think it's warranted. So I'm open to that idea, and maybe there will be some other thoughts on council as well for ways to roll this experiment out in our community in a limited way, and to do it with the best considerations of our community in mind.
Thank you, council member. And my second thing of the change you might like actually hearing that, but Mr. Fensel, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to call out that with respect to that proposed idea, I would like some time to research it and make sure that we're not running into any other legal issues there. If that's the way council would want to go, I would suggest, like I said before, going back to the language we had in the sample ordinance that we showed during the work session that limits establishments to dual licensees. That we can do. And then if council wants to expand beyond that, it would give us some time to look at that, look at the best way to do it, and then come back to council with an amendment to this ordinance rather than trying to squeeze it between the first and second read. That would just be my initial thought, because I do want some time to look at that, because we're not really in charge of licensing. That's the state's purview and the department's purview. So I want to make sure we're not getting in the way of anything or crossing a line.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Fensel. Mr. Seimer, you have a comment?
I just want to echo Kevin's comment from a license point of view. It is the same consideration that needs to be done from a zoning level. For example, we cannot prohibit McDonald's coming into town, nor can we require all businesses to be locally owned from a zoning perspective. So I do agree with Kevin that we would have to look at this in more depth and get back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Seimer. Councilmember McCarthy?
Yes, it might make sense to look into your idea, Mr. Deasy. One thing that I would be curious about, if we implemented that new rule, would we be putting any existing distributors out of business? We might, I'd hate to put a company that's already here out of business. So something to look into when we look into the rest of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. If I recall correctly, well, right now we only have the dual licensees, so those with the medical dispensaries, and I don't think we can even touch that. So that's, I guess, all that really does also speak to being proactive with this, so that we're not changing things after the other businesses are already starting up. I have a second point, but if anybody wants to put their 2 cents in about the licensing, but I do think we have enough. Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor. I like where your mind's at. I don't know if it's legal, but I am happy to see legal explore it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to run by everyone is we're waiting on the social equity licenses to be able to be issued from the state. And maybe if Mr. Fensel, you might be able to speak to what exactly that is, as it's written into the law for allowing the social equity licenses. So if you could just explain that a little more thoroughly, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, Mayor. So there's not a whole lot on social equity licenses other than what you said is what's in the act. And so what the act says about the program, it says that the department will create a program to, and this is just a quote, to promote the ownership and operation of marijuana establishments and marijuana testing facilities by individuals from communities disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of previous marijuana laws. What that means, I don't know. Like I said, the department is charged with creating some rules for that program. I don't know the exact timeline. It will probably be pretty soon. I do know that with respect to social equity licenses, that it creates an additional 26 licenses that are allowed statewide. So that does expand what you could possibly see with respect to recreational marijuana establishments. Like we discussed during the work session, the current number of the number of recreational marijuana establishments is capped at a ratio, I think it's 1 to 10 with pharmacies in the state. And that's one of the same limitations on medical marijuana establishments. And my understanding is we're pretty much at that cap right now in the state. As we get more pharmacies in the state, it will open up new medical licenses and then also recreational. But what I was told when I was doing some research on this act was that, the dual licensees, who are those medical marijuana establishments that are now going to be dual and selling recreational marijuana, assuming all of those medical establishments became dual, which is likely the case, that we're really going to be at the cap of the amount of additional establishments in the state, except for these 26 social equity licenses. So it does create the ability to get 26 more, but we just don't know a lot about them other than what I just read to you, which is kind of the intent of the program, to open up these licenses to people disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of previous marijuana laws.
Okay, thank you. And there's no way to kind of tell what the timeline of that is going to be, or?
I would have to, I could look into that. I could make a call to the department and see, and that, when I say the department, I'm talking about the Arizona Department of Health Services. I can make a call to the department and see if they have a timeline and do some research on that and speak to a couple of the other people in my colleagues who are more familiar with the marijuana rules and regulations. So I can get back to you on that and maybe send an email to council later this week on with a timeline.
That'd be great. I'd really appreciate it. City Attorney, you had a comment?
I think Kevin just answered it. The Arizona Department of Health Services does have on their website that they're not sure themselves when that timeline is going to be. But of course, if there's something more recent or current that we can find, as Kevin has indicated, by reaching out, we'll do that.
Thank you. Well, I guess I'll just kind of what I'm thinking here. Yeah, as I mentioned about the trying to keep this the mom and pop store, but also allowing for these equity licenses to be the first ones that are coming for recreational. To basically, this would give us kind of that pause button a little bit, as Councilmember Aslan is cautious about, and definitely reasonably so. I mean, we have two stores in town selling recreational right now. So it's already here, it's already being done. What I would like to make sure with this is thinking big picture, that we ensure it's the mom and pops, but also that it's going to the right individuals. As said, there's, the social equity licenses are a big part of being able to help with income inequality, with decades and centuries of inequities that have occurred in our criminal justice system. So I'm just floating this idea on there on what if we put a pause on this until we find out more, or pause on getting more licenses out there until we see those equity licenses in place. And just throwing it out there, Mr. Fensel, do you have any comments on? Do you have a comment on that, or?
Yeah, I would just reiterate the comment I made before with your other idea, which if council does want to go down that route, it's pretty easy. I would just go back to the language we had in the sample ordinance, which limits in Flagstaff recreational establishments to dual licensees. At that point, we would have the two we currently have in the city. And then when we get more information about the social equity licenses, when we do a little more research on your other idea, then we can come back to council with some proposed amendments and do a work session and talk about what council wants to do and what council can do, and then we can always amend from there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fensel. Vice Mayor, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. I could support that on both counts, waiting to see about the social equity licenses, as well as whether we can hold licenses to licensees that aren't licensed elsewhere. That's a lot of the use of license, but I could agree on both those points.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Sweet?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I would agree that hitting the pause button seems to be a good way to go, and I would support that. I feel like I don't have enough information to move forward given some of the new ideas of tonight. So I would like to hear the new information and circle back to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'd like to get other council members' thoughts on this. If this is potentially a direction we could go, we go back to just dual licensees. We have the ordinance for the the civil violations and so forth in there, and then we can address this as we get more information on equity licensing and what legally we may be able to do to prevent monopolization. Councilmember McCarthy?
So my understanding of the proposal is that we would allow recreational marijuana sales, but only at the dual establishment types. So if that's what the intent is, I could support that.
Yeah, Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for the discussion, and Mayor, for your thoughts. I'm okay with that. This doesn't impact the testing facilities, correct?
No, council member, it would not. That would be a separate provision, and it's not in our ordinance. So a testing facility would still be allowed in Flagstaff.
Okay, great. And yeah, I think that's okay. Generally, I'm not really for limiting, but I think for this reason that you brought up, Mayor, I think that that's fine, and I support that. And after putting some more thought into what I was trying to work towards, I think, Mr. Finsel, tell me if I'm wrong, but maybe we can have language acknowledging, awareness of the economic and employment hardship, and encouraging the courts to the extent possible, for marijuana violations, basically advocate for community service wherever possible and practical. Is that something we could include in the ordinance?
I wouldn't put that in the ordinance personally, and Sterling may want to talk here, and Brent mentioned it. I mean, you're really separate branches of government, and I'm always get a little concerned if council were going to try to suggest, even suggest to the court how it's supposed to operate its business. I think bigger policy questions, I think Brent was kind of talking about some other policy things that council can do, but with respect to the specifics of how the court is really going to be enforcing this, my recommendation would be to stay out of that, but Sterling may have another thought.
Sorry, taking some time to get the mute button off there. Of course, what I understood that discussion referring to, Councilmember Shimoni and Mayor and Council, was anything that is inconsistent with state law. Obviously, we're not going to be able to consider those alternatives. When it comes to what the court does, they do that independently, separately of what the legislators do, which is you as the council members. And to maintain that separation of government, you wouldn't be able to propose any alternatives in those realms, only where it's not inconsistent with state law, where there's not a provision already in place. Does that clarify?
I believe so, and so a recommendation that, like what I just outlined, wouldn't be appropriate in your eyes.
I would be very, cautious about that. I don't think it would be the best idea.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Aslan?
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I like the two ideas you're proposing. Let's move forward with that. There's no reason that we need to come. I was going to use a marijuana pun, but I'm not going to bother. We don't have to do this too quickly. Let's follow the new state law, and let's proceed cautiously. And there's no rush. There's no hurry. Again, in my mind, this isn't about the city's financial situation. It's entirely separate from that. So I don't see any reason to rush into this above and beyond what's mandated by the state. Let's see how that goes and take it from there. And I'm happy to revisit this as many times as need be over the next couple of years. And I assume that Councilmember Shimoni is withdrawing his suggestion. That I don't think that's something I would support anyway. I agree with the sentiment that we should let the courts decide how they're going to proceed with their with the ordinance on their end. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. With that, I guess I would ask Sterling, since we're at this point, is this, if we given staff direction, do we need to be making a vote now with this to move it forward, given these changes, and now we're kind of going back to the old format and just dual licensees for now? Or, yeah.
Mr. Fincel actually is prepared to comment on that, yes.
Yeah. So Mary, this is Kevin Fincel. So yeah, what you can do, since really what you're asking is, like I said, to go back to, let's limit it to the two medical marijuana establishments that are now dual licensees, and then we'll come back later when council is in a better position, gets a little more information about expanding beyond those two, and we can do that at a later date. So what you can do tonight, you can do the first read. So if a council member will make a motion to read the ordinance with an amendment to add the provision I have on the screen here. I assume that's on your screen, which will in effect limit recreational marijuana establishments to dual licensees. So I would first read with the amendment to add this provision. Then when we come back for the second read, this provision will be in there.
Excellent. Thank you for the clarification. Councilmember Aslan.
Mayor, if there's no further discussion, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Go for it.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and I'd like to move that we, let's see, okay, that we're doing a first read, right? Mm-hmm. First read of ordinance number 2021-03 as amended to limit its status. Okay. Well, okay, so I would like to include an amendment to keep our licensees as dual licensees. Does that work?
Well, works for me.
Kevin, I'm sorry if I need to be more specific.
I was going to let Sterling make the final call on that one. He can be the arbiter.
You know, I think just as Kevin has indicated, to go back to the dual licensees is sufficient to keep the dual licensees, as you've stated. Councilmember Aslan will work.
Yes, to keep dual licensees as well as what? As the only established licensees for marijuana dispensary and registration.
Yeah. You're limiting the recreational marijuana establishments to dual licensees.
Thank you.
Yep. And I would just refer to the provision, adding the provision that's on the screen. I mean, it's pretty, I think everybody is understanding.
Okay.
Here.
Great. Yeah. So let me start over. I would like to move that we do a first read of Sydney Ordinance number 2021-03 as amended with the language shown on the screen right now.
Perfect. Vice Mayor.
I will second that long motion.
Excellent. I have a motion from Councilmember Aslan, seconded by Vice Mayor Daggett. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay. Councilmember Salas.
Thank you, Councilmember. That motion passes. All right, we are down to agenda item number 10. This is our council liaison reports. Yes. Oh,
sorry, we do need to read the ordinance.
Yep, I'm sorry. Thank you.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Flagstaff, Arizona, amending the Flagstaff City Code Title VI Police Regulations by adopting a new Chapter 6-10 regulation of recreational marijuana, providing repeal of conflicting ordinances, severability, authority for clerical corrections, and establishing an effective date as amended.
Thank you, City Clerk. So we're now down to agenda item number 10, which is our council liaison reports. I'll just go down the list and see if you have a council anything to discuss. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I think the only thing I have to report, as I've stated before, the Housing Commission is getting ready to take public comment on a 10-year plan. And right now they have formed subcommittees that are working on various topics related to housing, and they're collecting contact information from people who would like to be kept aware of every step of this process. So I encourage people to go to the city's website, to the housing section, and sign yourself up as a stakeholder. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Aslan.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have much to report. I would just like to note that I've had several meetings this week. I did join the Sustainability Commission for their monthly meeting where they handed out, where they judged, weighted a lot of different grant applicants and handed out some sustainability grants. That was a really fun, exciting community process. And they will be coming back to council, I believe, later this month in March with some really important decisions for us to weigh in on in terms of how strong we want to go with implementing the cap with some specific different decision points that we can make in terms of exactly how to do that. And then I'm the chair of the Coconino Plateau Water Advisory Council. We met on Friday. We had a good meeting and a great presentation. Not too much to announce there, but just staying busy and keeping things going, and looking forward to March. Looking forward to spring break and a little bit of camping, and a lot of new movement and good news coming from the CDC and our county in terms of our COVID updates. It remains to be seen what that data will show, but I am hopeful and optimistic.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just mention that tomorrow the Metro Plan, the transportation specialist will be meeting tomorrow. Other than that, I don't have anything this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Salas.
I have three items. First off, I missed the majority of the meeting of the Tourism Commission last week because it coincided with our executive session. But I did get the numbers for the occupancy for January in terms of hotel occupancy. So I just want to note that there was a 12.6% increase between 2020 and 2021 numbers. So in January 2020, occupancy rate was 53.1%, and 2021, 59.8%. We can thank the back-to-back snowstorms we've had in January for occupancy at the hotels. I hope it will make a huge dent in BBB tax revenue collection. And then I also attended the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting last week. And they have gone through the proposed fiscal year 2021-2022 budget for the Parks and Recreation Department. And they have started reviewing the the existing master plan for Parks and Rec, which needs to be reviewed. So they will take it piece by piece and will put forth some recommendation to council in the future. And most importantly, I attended the Economic Collaborative of Northern Arizona, ECONA, advisory board meeting when we had Senator Mark Kelly as the guest speaker, who amplified his priorities on transportation infrastructure, economic development and tourism, workforce development, military veterans affairs, broadband, advanced manufacturing, forest restoration. And I had the opportunity to bring up to his attention our federal legislative priority about attainable, affordable housing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of updates for the group. The Indigenous Commission met last week, and our coordinator for Indigenous Initiatives, Rose Tohi, helped facilitate the discussion, and still a pretty introductory meeting going over the scope of work and the task at hand and the responsibility of the commission. So definitely we'll keep you all posted on their progress, but not too much to report on that behalf. And then the 911 diversion group that is focused on diverting calls when it comes to mental health and specifically potential suicidal calls met yesterday and are working through some kinks and are doing good work. It's a small amount of calls that are being diverted that qualify for the CRN, the Crisis Response Network, of which can dispatch TEROS, the local mobile crisis team, when appropriate. But that's my update, and thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Sweet.
Thank you. I did attend my first NACOG and Water Commission last week, and I will provide more details to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I don't have a liaison to report, which then will take us down to agenda item number 11, our future agenda item requests. First is a request by Councilmember Salas to place on a future agenda a discussion to consider a code of conduct and ethics standards to govern mayor and council. And I understand we have one public comment. Ms. Bobar, you can patch them through.
Wait, is this on Regina's?
Fair item.
Holy. Let me turn off my radio.
Just one moment, Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Victoria?
We're ready to go here, huh?
Mr. Victoria, you are ready. Go ahead and start.
Okay, holy smokes. Look, I was expecting a later call, but guess what? That didn't happen. Okay. This is for you, Regina. This is truly a small thank you on my part for your courageous efforts tonight, focusing on the community well-being of our Flagstaff. I'm referring to your efforts on establishing a code of ethics for the city council and perhaps for others. Very good, Regina. There's a gentleman, his name is Joseph Ellis. he authored a book that's called The Founding Fathers. It's about Washington, Franklin, Jefferson, and others. In the book, Ellis tells us that true leadership steps forward in times of crisis, challenge, or other great difficulty. Flagstaff, Arizona is facing a difficulty like that right now because of some unfortunate behavior on the part of Paul Deasy, who is acting as our mayor. He does not seem to have the ethical standards needed to meet community standards. So I wanted to, your efforts in addressing this issue are wonderful, Regina. These are just words on my part, and words can do somewhat good, and they can do somewhat bad too. But your part has been the action part. The action part is what you have given Flagstaff. Let's see if the Flagstaff leadership agrees. Good luck, Regina, and thank you again for stepping forward as a leader when we needed a leader. That's all I have. Thanks a lot. Sorry I wasn't quite ready, but it's all done for right now. Thanks again, Regina. Bye-bye.
Hold on just a moment, sir. He did hang up.
All right. Then Councilmember Salas, would you like to present this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have spent about 3 hours of research, and well, first and foremost, collaboration among elected bodies and between individual members takes effort. Finding common ground and cultivating respectful relationships can make for a more civil and effective governing body. A code of conduct and ethical standards can help facilitate such collaboration and serve as a framework for the quorum between individual members and the elected body as a whole. I put forth this fair item to hold ourselves to the highest ethical standards in public service as both a personal quest and an organizational imperative. Conducting ourselves as public servants who truly live by the highest ethical standards is not easy. It is also critically important in seeking and maintaining the public's trust. Investing our time engaging in how we create and maintain a culture of ethics within our city is the best way to ensure we all have the knowledge and the support we need to succeed. So in my research, so far, I have documented 9 cities and towns in Arizona who have somewhat codified their code of conduct and ethical standards for mayor and council. So they're the city of Maricopa, city of Mesa, city of Phoenix, city of Glendale, city of Scottsdale, city of Tolleson, city of Tucson, town of Carefree, and city of Tempe. And I'm more than glad to share this information should we move forward. I do also want to mention that in our existing there exists a code of ethics specifically for our City of Flagstaff purchasing code, which is being upheld nationally, and also in our HR policies, there's an ethics policy for city employees. And these are existing policies within the city that we can build upon. And I also want to mention that the League of Arizona Cities and Towns has came up with a publication, 177 pages, which is entitled "You as an Elected Official," which also covers which partly covers ethics and decorum, as well as the Arizona City County Management Association Code of Ethics, which is a state affiliate of the International City County Management Association. So there's so much best practices out there that we can build upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. Council, do we have comments on this item? Councilmember McCarthy.
I would support moving this forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Salas, for bringing this forward. Yeah, I too think that this conversation should move forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And as it moves forward, I just would like to see if we could also add, not just for decorum, but potential conflicts of interest and beefing up some of those laws that I know are at the state level, but it's my understanding we do have the ability to increase those standards, just not decrease the standards. And I'd like that to be part of the conversation. Councilmember Shimoni has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. This might be a question for legal. I'm not sure if we're allowed to do that in terms of like adding on to a fair item once it's already written like this. Sterling, can you weigh in on that? I might be wrong.
Absolutely. I appreciate the question. I understand what you've referenced, Mayor, as conflicts of interest. You're correct. Those are addressed under state law. With respect to fairs, the expansion of a scope of a fair is something that has come up in the past that we've had some concerns with. So adding that in here would not be possible to expand the scope of the fair. Of course, if conflicts of interest are already something that are within the materials that Councilmember Salas has been putting together. I know it's within what she referenced as far as the league documents. Anywhere that it's within those materials, that's going to be fair game. But I just want to make sure we're all clear that any expansion beyond that wouldn't be appropriate.
Thank you, Sterling. And Mayor, it's not anything against what you shared. I fully support what you're advocating for. I just wasn't sure if we were allowed to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the clarification. I just assumed because it's considered the code of conduct and ethics standards, it might fit in there as part of the conversation. But we can add that on and see what these templates are looking like and what the other cities are doing, and yeah, build from there. So I'm good with that. Then I'm down to unless there's, Councilmember Aslan has a comment.
Oh, just real quickly, I just wanted to thank you, Councilmember Salas, for bringing this forward and putting the research into it. I'm very happy to explore this further. I don't want to prejudge any outcomes or anything, but I think we're at the point where we need to have this kind of conversation, and looking forward to the result. And I hope it's a result that makes our city more whole now and in the future as well. You know, we all learn from our mistakes as we go forward, and there's nothing wrong with sort of taking that added wisdom and institutionalizing it. So I appreciate what you're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Aslan. All right, I'm not seeing anything else in here. So we are down to agenda item 11B, which is a request by myself to place on a future agenda a discussion to consider legislation that makes it illegal to fabricate a 911 report based on someone's race, ethnicity, religious affiliation, gender, or sexual orientation. Councilmember McCarthy, you have a comment?
Yes, I do. I would think that falsifying a 911 report should be illegal, period. I don't know why we need to add on all this other stuff. If it's illegal, it's illegal, regardless of why it's illegal. But I'm open to discussion.
Well, it's the same kind of idea as a hate crime. I mean, assault's already illegal. Why do we need a hate crime added on? That's kind of the train of thinking. And let me just kind of back up and kind of tell you what brought this to my mind. Some of you probably don't know, but I have two Sudanese foster brothers who, after escaping war and walking thousands of miles from Sudan to Ethiopia to be driven out by militants, to walk another 1,000 miles to Kenya without parents, with small children on their backs. Well, they were finally able to make it to the United States. And, we grew up in an affluent neighborhood. Literally the first day, my brothers were walking home from Sanawa High, when it was a high school. Back home, they had the police called on them, like just walking home from school. This was not the only time that this type of situation occurred, but you can also think about first day in America after experiencing that, how traumatizing it was for them to have to face this on their first day in America, when they finally felt that they were safe and free. And these aren't the only times I hear of this, and inevitably, maybe it's going to give people a pause to even make a phone call in the first place if they can check themselves on, hey, maybe why am I calling this here? So, yeah, I guess that's the reasoning behind why I'm putting this forward. So I'm happy to talk it out or get comments or whatnot from other council members regarding this. Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor. And I hear you. My question is for Mary Ann Sullivan with our police department, or Chief Musselman, if you all are on the call. I'm just curious as to your thoughts in regards to the legality of falsifying or fabricating a 911 call. Are either of you on the call?
Yes, I'm here, Councilmember Shimoni. I looked into kind of what's out there with regard to this. With regard to Arizona law specifically, right now there is section 132907.01, which is making a false report to a law enforcement agency. Based on that law, I believe that would include calls to 911, as our 911 dispatch center is part of our law enforcement agency. So we do have that on the books. It does not specify, as the fare that is proposed, if the impetus for the call is race-based or a prejudice or bias. So the current state law does not kind of consider that, but there is a state law that would, prohibit a false report period to a law enforcement agency. These types of laws are something that are becoming more prevalent, especially within the last couple years or so. And there seems to be 3 different approaches that I've seen in the limited research. I just did some quick research into this area. And one is as I think Mayor DC has indicated, a hate crime enhancement, and adding that, kind of to the laws. Another is changing penalties for existing false reporting laws, like the one that we have on the state level, which makes it a higher penalty, not just a misdemeanor, but possibly even a felony offense if the impetus or motivation is race-based. And then a third approach has been allowing victims or individuals who are called upon to have a civil cause of action to sue the individuals who have called on them. So those are the different approaches that are out there. Mostly what I've seen have been done at the state level, but there are some cities that have done made proposals on the local level, and so we could look into what those cities have done, and see if this moves forward, with direction from council as to what you want to see done. But that's kind of what the different approaches that are out there and what our current state law prohibits now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, gosh, I don't really know how to handle this, Mayor. I think that we have things in place to kind of help create those parameters. Maybe better outreach and education to the community would be a good first step, comes to mind, about acceptance and differences and multicultural things. But I don't know. I'm curious what others have to say or think. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Aslan.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, Mr. Mayor, my condolences for the story that you had to share. Hearing that is absolutely infuriating. It's very disappointing, and I understand the frustration and the sense of injustice that must cause for you and for your whole family, and for the community. I'm not inclined to support moving this forward based on a couple of things. One of the things I've learned being on council for a couple of years is that we need to use the tool of fair items very judiciously, because otherwise we're going to gum up and overburden our city staff with, this represents a lot of work. I'm not sure if anybody wants to come on and calculate the number of hours that somebody's going to be working on this for. I don't think that's necessary. I'm not asking somebody to, but I just know that we need to be very careful about moving these things forward. And for me, while this is a great idea, my sense of things, Mr. Mayor, is that we already have this law in the books. It's already illegal to fabricate a 911 report. And then, Marianne, I do have a question for you, and this will add to my understanding of the topic. So I hope you're able to sort of bounce off of this a little bit. What is the likelihood that something like this will be enforceable? And even just in the scenario that the mayor brought up, and obviously, Marianne, you and I don't know the details for that, but what's the likelihood that if this fair request moves forward and there's a new law in the books that makes a fabricated 9/11 report based on race, ethnicity, religious affiliation, gender, or sexual orientation, how is that going to change the outcome for a call to 911 like that?
That is something that's difficult to answer. I would think that, in a given situation, when people call 911, it's usually, because they're observing something they believe is to be, suspicious or a crime or that kind of thing. And, if something is primarily based or motivated by somebody's race, that may or may not be something that's easy to prove. I think it would be somewhat difficult to prove depending on the circumstances. There's also kind of a flip side to, community policing, where we invite our community to, watch out for their neighbors, have neighborhood watch programs, and, to call, if you see something, call and report it. So it may be something that is somewhat difficult to prove, especially if somebody who is engaged in criminal activity happens to be of a person of color, and somebody's simply calling to report what they think is criminal activity, and then it gets turned around on them and say, well, why are you calling? Is it because of race? And so it may or may not be something that's easy to enforce if we were to pass such an ordinance.
Yeah, so thank you, Marianne. I appreciate that. in my mind, when I moved through this thought experiment, and there's something caught on the recording which clearly shows that the caller was violating these principles, I think there would be plenty of leeway to move ahead with very strong efforts to prosecute that behavior in the first place. I just don't see that this adds to the toolbox that our law enforcement has. I think there might be some more appropriate avenues first that allows us to dig into this a little further. And I would like to see some data on how much of a need there is for this. I'm not saying there isn't a need. I'm not skeptical of that whatsoever. I just would like to know more if this is really something we need to invest staff time and energy in at this point. And then also, again, talking about nailing that Jell-O to the wall. If we're able to find a there with a phone call, I think that creates an avenue for us to follow up with prosecution to begin with. I don't know that going further than that adds to the healing of the community at this point. So I'm probably not going to support moving this forward, although if it does move forward, I would love to continue to be a part of the conversation.
You, Councilmember. Vice Mayor Daggett.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Sullivan, would you be able to tell me what would likely happen if, like, say a scenario like the mayor just spelled out, where it pretty clearly sounds like someone called the police because there were two black men walking down the street. In a case like that, are you able to even speculate on what recourse they might have under current law to do something about that?
Well, it would depend. I mean, factually, one of the first questions would be is, do we even know who called? You can call Crime Stoppers and be anonymous. So it may be difficult in that situation to know who the person is that called. Generally, though, if it's somebody who's calling to make a report, they are providing their information to dispatch, and we can follow up with that individual. In a situation, it's hard without like more specific facts or to have, more, what did the caller say? What were they reporting? What were the reasons given in the call, that would lead police to come out? And, if police respond, they obviously have to have reasonable suspicion to detain somebody based on whatever the information is that was provided to them. Unfortunately, oftentimes information provided to dispatch is very limited, and the information provided to the officers is very limited. But generally, there is somewhat a presumption that somebody who's calling in to report something to 911, it is an emergency that needs to be responded to immediately, and that's what the officers do. So, at this point, if we were able to, if the officers were called to a situation such as Mayor described, they determined that, there is no criminal conduct occurring, make contact with individuals, make that determination. There could then be a second step to that investigation to go back to dispatch, call the reporting party, do a further investigation as to, why did you call the police, in this situation, if, the information provided, wasn't ferreted out. The problem being is perception and impression, and how that's going to be, interpreted. So at that point, those who, in terms of any recourse under criminal law, existing law, obviously there would have to be probable cause to believe that the person who called in knew that they were making a false report to a law enforcement agency. And so, whether it rises to that level for at least a charge and then going beyond that for criminal prosecution, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt in court. So for criminal purposes, that may be something that's very difficult to do. In terms of any sort of civil recourse, the individuals contacted, depending on that contact, how it impacts them, may or may not, have a civil action against the individual who called.
Okay, thank you. So I too have heard from people in the community who are stopped, walking across a parking lot or whatever, and believe that it is because of their appearance and not anything that they're doing. So I'm wondering if this isn't the answer to that, what might be an answer to that? I do think that this deserves further exploration, because I do believe that it happens to people in our community. So I guess I don't really have an answer other than to say that I agree that this happens to people in our community, and I'm wondering what the best course of action to work to stop that from happening is.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Ms. Sullivan, I have a comment.
Yes, just to address something that Vice Mayor stated. One of the trainings that I've done through our Police Community Liaison Committee is Know Your Rights, Know an Officer's Authority. And one of the things that we discuss within that is that officers can only stop somebody based upon reasonable suspicion. And what that means is that they have to have some reasonable suspicion that that person's, is participating in a crime or has participated in a crime. And one of the anecdotes that I talk about is that my mother was pulled over, and she was very upset. She was pulled over because she had done nothing wrong. And she called me and said, "What happened?" I said, "What did the officer tell you?" She said, "Well, they had gotten a report of a possible drunk driver driving a silver Honda in the area." And I said, "Well, were you driving your silver Honda?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Well, then the officer had reasonable suspicion to stop you, even though you had done nothing wrong." So in those situations, and I get it, she was upset. But the legality of that situation is that if the officer has the requisite reasonable suspicion, they can stop somebody to investigate and dispel whether or not that's the person who is involved. And, in that situation, the officer, that stopped my mother, determined she was not drunk, she was not the person that they were looking for, and let her go on her way. She felt very upset by that because she hadn't done anything wrong. But on the flip side of that, that was perfectly legal for that officer to do that. So, given those constraints, and it's something I wish more people knew, because I understand how people get very upset. I didn't do anything wrong. Why are you stopping me? Why are you talking to me? When the officer may legitimately have a reason to do that. Another example in our community when that happened was when there was the stabbing event that happened outside of the elementary school. And the school was locked down. Our officers flooded the area looking for the description of that suspect, and stopped, probably 10 or more people who fit that description, trying to find the perpetrator. So those stops were legal, even though 9 of the 10 weren't the person involved. So just that's something in terms of the legality to keep in mind, and something that I wish sometimes our public had a better understanding of, to make those community policing relations a little bit better.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. City Attorney?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mary Ann. Mayor and Vice Mayor, to your question and council, this kind of gets back to something that was raised with the last fair and the procedural, perspective here or process for fairs. One thing I need to clarify, Vice Mayor, was that basically a statement of support for moving this fair forward? Because if it was, that's fine, we can move on. If it wasn't, and we're looking at instead at, is there something staff can look into to possibly address the situation short of what this fair is? That's a separate question. And if there's a majority of council that wants to give direction to staff to look into something else, that's fine. But I did need to clarify, was it a statement of support?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mr. Solomon. I think that I stopped short of supporting, well, it's not that I don't support a discussion. I think that I would support a broader discussion of the issue and what the best method for addressing it is. So I think that gets into what we talked about previously, is not expanding upon what the council member who placed this on the agenda intended, correct?
And sure, even though it isn't appropriate to expand upon something that is written specifically as a fair, we do have the leeway, obviously, to say, well, if council is directing staff to look at the broader issue here, a majority of council wants that, then that's in the context of streamlining fair items. That is within, the purview of the council if there's a greater desire to look at the broader issue.
Thank you for the clarification, City Attorney. I know the language in here says that I'm making it illegal, but inevitably, I just want to figure out methods to address these kinds of situations that are not just isolated to my own family. I get a lot of reports and stories about these things going on. And so, honestly, I'm open to a lot of other ideas. I had just known this to be an issue, had seen that other cities are doing similarly to help mitigate or reduce these occurrences from happening. So, I guess if that is within the scope of our ability to move forward as a fair for a discussion about how to address the issue as opposed to the specific suggestion I gave, then I'd love to get some support so we can talk this out and figure out a method. So, Vice Mayor.
I would support that. Having a broader discussion about how to address the issue.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Aslan?
In general terms, I would agree with that. My suggestion for the best way to move forward is let's strike down this fair and then come back with another one that is less prescriptive and specific and more generative of an open dialogue between ourselves, the city, the police department, the community, that creates some open opportunities to consider new ways of thinking about this stuff. And perhaps it could be couched in our larger push right now for our Black lived experience conversations, the conversations we're trying to have with other community groups as well. And there's some way that we can take the very well-meaning sentiments of this very real frustration that you're feeling and sharing with us and turn it into a larger mechanism for a bigger conversation. I think that's separate from this fair request, though, and the best thing to do right now is to let this one go and come back with another fair that's a bit more broad in scope and frankly even more ambitious. Just thinking out loud. I understand where you're coming from and what you're trying to do, and I actually think that there's a bigger conversation to be had here than the narrow focus of this fair as it's written.
Duly noted. Well, maybe that's a better route with this situation, is to have a broader discussion, and maybe it does appear that at least we have interest in trying to address the fundamental reasoning for having this fair. So maybe let's drop this fair then and agendize something in the near future to be having a broader discussion that we can bring up and talk a little more holistically rather than scripted as such in our agenda. Councilmember Sweet.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to express my support in that sentiment. Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no further comment or questions or comments at this point.
Procedurally speaking, then, Mayor, Council, I understand, Mayor, you've withdrawn the fair. And Greg, Stacy, perhaps we can get together and discuss how and when some other discussion could come forward, or Mayor, you could join us in that. I don't know, Greg, what your thoughts would be on that.
We could just put forth a new fair in the next agenda item during to from. Honestly, right?
Well,
procedurally, you could do that too.
Well, procedurally though, then are we going to be stuck harder on a fair item for broadening the discussion if I'm doing a kind of scripted one, or is
you might want to take a week and draft some language that's has a week worth of thought behind it instead of just reacting to what's happening right now.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Let's drop this, and you know what? I'll do some research too to see how other municipalities are handling this situation, not just some of the bigger headline ones that I had seen regarding this issue and how they were addressing it. So let me dig a little deeper, and we'll reconvene this discussion at a later time. Sound good?
Excellent. And Mayor, if we can be of any assistance from my office, from the City Attorney's office on that as well, please let us know.
Thank you, City Attorney. I appreciate that. All right. Well, we're down to agenda item number 12A, our City Manager report. City Manager is, we're going and speaking to it, but definitely look it up. Lots of great information, as always, in the City Manager's report. Definitely urge the public to pay attention to it and get to see all the good work the team is doing here in Flag. That takes us down to agenda item 13, our informational items and reports from council and staff, future agenda item requests. All right, let's go reverse order from the liaison reports and start with Council Member Sweet.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see. I have had some questions from the community members on how council is moving forward from recent events that have occurred on the dais. And I'm sure you all have read the letters to the editor in the Daily Sun expressing concern. So I have drafted a short and sweet letter to the Daily Sun in response with a clear message that we acknowledge the work that is needed to move forward and that we are doing just that. I do think some communication from council as a whole would be beneficial. And I believe Mr. Clifton will be emailing the letter out to council with the capability of edits. My goal is to hopefully all of us agree on the letter, send it to the Daily Sun for the letter to the editor. And I would like to get this going as soon as possible to keep open communication with our community. Mr. Clifton, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Council Member. Our role in this is just to facilitate. This letter has come to my desk from Council Member Sweet. Thank you very much, Council Member. And I asked her to please garner support by the council. I'm glad to forward this. I think we would be able to entertain edits and suggestions along the way. It will take a little bit of time. And then in the interest of transparency, if there is, I think what is being sought here is unanimity with the council to send this letter. I think that's, I think a letter like this should be from everybody. We will put it on a future council agenda as a consent item so that the public has an opportunity to see the letter as well. Glad to assist in any way possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Shimoni.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so a couple things. Mayor and council and leadership, I'd like for us to talk about portable bathrooms or porta-johns at our next conversation on COVID, if possible. I'd like to see if there's council support to addressing some of the needs of our sheltered population with portable bathrooms in different key locations and sanitation stations. And I do know that we've received sanitation stations donated to the city, so thank you to that organization that did that. Very much appreciated. It's in the city manager report. I also just wanted to mention, I know that drinking and driving and domestic violence is on the rise and has been. And I don't know what we can do about that, but drinking and driving and domestic violence is a huge concern to all of us and is very much, unfortunately, prevalent today in our community. I also just wanted to mention a couple things from the city manager report. The text to 911 option is live, and that is a great resource. And thank you, Chief Musselman. And I just wanted to give two shout outs to one to our firefighting team that helped with the incident on Mount Eldon and camped out the night with the individual who had the ankle injury, I believe it was, to make sure that individual was able to be brought home safely, helicoptered home safely. And then to Officer Guy Rogers, who responded to a call where a 1-year-old baby was found not breathing. And Officer Guy Rogers performed CPR for nearly 5 minutes until medical personnel arrived. And that baby is currently in stable condition. And thanks to the officer's efforts. So thank you, Officer Rogers. We appreciate that extremely. Our community is extremely grateful to your efforts. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. Councilmember Saltz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to share that March is International Women's Month, and a week from yesterday would be March 8th is International Women's Day. And here in the US, March is Women's History Month. So the Library of Congress, National Archives and Records Administration, National Endowment for the Humanities, National Gallery of Art, National Park Service, Smithsonian Institution, and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum has joined in commemorating and encouraging the study, observance, and celebration of the vital role of women in American history. And there's a specific site, so it's womenshistorymonth.gov. Thank you. Stay well.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think I have anything more to add at this point, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Aslan.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Councilmember Shimoni, for lifting up some of those details from the city manager's report. It's a great report. I really do recommend everybody read it. They're always very entertaining. I love your voice, Greg, that you use in these. I have nothing else to add tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to let people know, if they don't already know, that the county has opened up vaccinations to individuals aged 55 and older. So hopefully everybody who qualifies for 1A or B has already scheduled their appointment or is getting ready to schedule their appointment for a vaccination. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Well, all I have to say tonight is thank you all for a very efficient meeting. It's 6:35. I did not expect to be able to get all that we needed to get done in this amount of time. So thank you, council. Thank you, city staff. I'm loving the efficiency. So with that being said, I am down to agenda item 14. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.